I found my daughter dying alone in intensive care while her husband was popping champagne on a yacht with women half his age. He told the doctors he was out raising money for her treatment. He told his friends he was finally free. He looked at me and saw a broke old man in dirty work boots, someone he could laugh at and toss aside. He didn't know that the dirty old man held the deed to his house, the keys to his bank accounts, and the power to erase his entire existence with a single phone call. By the time the sun rose over Los Angeles, he wasn't celebrating anymore. He was swimming for his life. Before I tell you how I destroyed him, please hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you have ever been underestimated by someone who judged a book by its cover. My name is Cyrus Blackwood. To my neighbors in Chicago, I am just a retired mechanic who drives a rusted 2004 pickup truck and wears flannel shirts stained with grease. They see an old man who fixes lawnmowers for free and spends his evenings sitting on a porch that needs painting. They do not know about the steel patents. They do not know about the bridges I designed that span rivers across 3 states. And they certainly do not know about the Blackwood Trust, a financial fortress I built brick by brick to protect the only thing that ever mattered to me, my daughter Zola. The call that shattered my world came at 2:14 in the morning. The digital clock on my nightstand was glowing red in the dark when the phone rang. It is a sound that every parent dreads, a shrill alarm that cuts through the silence of the night like a knife. When I answered, the voice on the other end was clinical, professional, and terrifying. It was a nurse from St. Jude Medical Center in Los Angeles. "Your daughter has been in a severe accident, Mr. Blackwood. You need to come now." I did not ask questions. I did not panic. I simply hung up the phone, grabbed my go bag, and drove to O'Hare International Airport. I did not change my clothes. I was wearing my old work pants and a jacket with a tear in the elbow. I bought the first ticket to Los Angeles sitting in a middle seat in economy while my mind raced 1,000 miles an hour. Zola. My beautiful, brilliant Zola. She was an architect, a creator of spaces, a woman with a heart too big for this cruel world. She had moved to LA 5 years ago after marrying Hunter. Just thinking his name made my jaw tighten. Hunter was a man who called himself an entrepreneur, but whose only real talent was spending money he did not earn. I had never trusted him. I saw the way he looked at Zola, not with love, but with the hunger of a parasite attaching itself to a host. But Zola loved him, so I stayed silent. I stayed in the shadows. I played the part of the poor, distant father so that Hunter would never know the true size of the fortune he was trying to marry into. The flight felt like it lasted a decade. When I landed at LAX, the California sun was blinding, a cruel contrast to the darkness in my heart. I didn't wait for a taxi. I rented the first car available and drove like a madman to the hospital. The smell of the intensive care unit is something you never forget. It smells of antiseptic, cold air, and fear. I walked down the hallway, my heavy boots thudding against the pristine linoleum floor. I saw doctors rushing past, nurses checking charts, families weeping in corners. I kept walking until I found room 304. I stopped in the doorway and my breath caught in my throat. There she was, Zola. She looked so small in that bed. My strong, vibrant girl was pale and still surrounded by a forest of machines that beeped and hissed in a terrifying rhythm. A tube was down her throat. Her head was wrapped in bandages. Her left arm was in a cast. She looked broken. But what stopped my heart wasn't just her condition. It was the silence. The room was empty. There was no one holding her hand. There was no one sleeping in the chair beside her. There was no husband pacing the floor demanding answers from the doctors. She was completely alone. I stepped into the room, my legs feeling like lead. I reached out and touched her hand. It was cold. "Where is he?" I whispered to the empty room. "Where is the man who swore to protect you?" "Excuse me, sir, you cannot be in here." I turned around. A large woman in blue scrubs was standing in the doorway blocking my path. Her name tag read, Mabel Head Nurse. She had a face carved from granite and eyes that had seen everything. She looked me up and down, taking in my messy hair, my grease-stained jacket, and my old boots. Her expression hardened. "Visiting hours are over and this is a restricted area," she said, her voice firm. "Immediate family only." "I am her father," I said, my voice raspy from hours of not speaking. "I just flew in from Chicago." Mabel crossed her arms. "I need to see identification, and honestly, sir, we have strict hygiene protocols here. You look like you came straight from a construction site. We cannot risk infection." She was judging me, just like everyone else. She saw a bum. She saw a nobody. I did not have time to be offended. I reached into my inner jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. It was not a wallet. It was a thick envelope that never left my side. I handed it to her. "This is a medical proxy signed and notarized 5 years ago," I said, my voice steady and cold. "It grants me full authority over Zola Blackwood's medical decisions in the event of her incapacitation. It supersedes any authority held by her spouse. You can verify the seal with your legal department." Mabel unfolded the paper. Her eyebrows shot up as she read the legal language. It was ironclad, drafted by the best lawyers in Chicago. She looked at the paper, then back at me. Her demeanor shifted. She was no longer looking at a bum. She was looking at a man who came prepared. "I apologize, Mr. Blackwood," she said, handing the paper back. "We have to be careful." "Where is her husband?" I asked. "Where is Hunter?" Mabel hesitated. She looked at Zola, then back at me. A shadow of disgust crossed her face. It was brief, but I caught it. "Mr. Hunter was here when the ambulance brought her in," she said, choosing her words carefully. "He signed the consent forms for the emergency surgery, and then I pressed. And then he left," she said. "He told us he had to go meet with some investors. He said he needed to secure funds to pay for her treatment since, well, he mentioned that things were tight financially. He hasn't been back for 12 hours. We have been trying to call him, but it goes straight to voicemail. He left. My daughter was lying here clinging to life by a thread, and her husband left to go to a business meeting. The rage that ignited in my chest was not a hot fire. It was cold. It was absolute. It was the kind of rage that builds empires and destroys cities. He said he was going to raise money. I asked quietly. "That is what he said," Mabel replied. She walked over to the bedside table where a clear plastic bag held Zola's personal effects. Her watch, her earrings, and her cell phone. The phone buzzed. It was a short, sharp vibration against the plastic table. Then it buzzed again. And again. Mabel picked up the bag. "It keeps doing that. Notifications. I should probably turn it off." "Let me see it," I said. Mabel hesitated, then handed me the phone through the plastic. I hit the side button to wake up the screen. Zola's lock screen was a picture of her and Hunter on their wedding day. She looked radiant. He looked like he had won the lottery. There was a notification right in the center of the screen. It was from Instagram. Hunter Vibes started a live video. My finger hovered over the screen. A business meeting. Investors. Raising money. I slid the notification open. Since I knew Zola's passcode, it was her mother's birthday. She never changed it. The phone unlocked, and the app opened. The screen filled with bright, harsh light. The camera was shaky, moving around. I heard the sound of bass-heavy music thumping in the background. Then I heard laughter. And then I saw him. Hunter was holding the camera selfie style. He was not in a boardroom. He was not in an office. He was shirtless, wearing sunglasses with the blue ocean stretching out behind him. He was on the deck of a yacht. "What is up, everyone?" Hunter shouted into the camera, raising a bottle of Cristal champagne. "We are live from the Pacific. Big things coming. New chapter starting today." He panned the camera around. There were girls in bikinis dancing on the deck. There were bottles of expensive liquor everywhere. The sun was shining. It was a party. I watched as he wrapped his arm around a blonde woman in a red bikini. She laughed and kissed him on the cheek. "To freedom," Hunter yelled, clinking his bottle against hers. To the next level, he typed a caption on the screen before ending the live stream. I read it, and my blood turned to ice. Celebrating early. The universe clears the path for those who wait. New life. Blessed. I stood there in the dim light of the ICU, the beeping of my daughter's heart monitor, the only sound keeping me tethered to reality. He was celebrating. My daughter was dying, and he was celebrating her death before she was even cold. He thought he was free. He thought the obstacle was gone. I looked at Zola. I looked at her broken body. I made a promise to her in the silence of that room. "Nurse," I said, not taking my eyes off the screen. "Yes, Mr. Blackwood," Mabel asked. "I need you to keep him out of this room if he returns. Call security. Call the police." "I don't care. He does not touch her." "I can do that," Mabel said. Her voice was soft now. She had seen the screen. She knew. I put the phone in my pocket. I did not turn it off. I needed the evidence. "Where are you going?" Mabel asked as I turned toward the door. "I am going to crash a party," I said. I walked out of the ICU. I did not look like a tired old man anymore. I walked with the purpose of a machine. Hunter wanted a new life. He wanted the money he thought Zola had. He wanted freedom. I was going to give him exactly what he deserved. I pulled out my own phone, a secure line that I only used for the trust. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 2 years. It rang once. "Stein," I said. "Cyrus." The voice on the other end was sharp alert. It was my lawyer, a man who could find a loophole in the 10 Commandments. "It's 3 a.m. in Chicago." "What's wrong?" "Initiate the Omega Protocol," I said. There was a pause. A long, heavy silence. The Omega Protocol was the nuclear option. It was designed for one specific scenario: the total and immediate freezing of all assets connected to the Blackwood beneficiaries in the event of a hostile threat. "Are you sure?" Stein asked. "That scorches the earth, Cyrus. It locks everything. Cards, accounts, deeds, access codes. It effectively erases the financial existence of anyone attached to the main line." "I am sure," I said, stepping into the elevator. "Target is Hunter. Freeze him out. I want his cards to decline. I want his access revoked. I want him to be a ghost by the time I get to the marina." "Consider it done," Stein said. "Give me 10 minutes. I hung up. The elevator doors opened to the lobby. I walked out into the blinding Los Angeles sun. I had a yacht to find, and I had a son-in-law to break. I stood in the blinding glare of the hospital parking lot, my back against the hot metal of my rental car. Inside the intensive care unit, the only sound was the rhythmic mechanical hiss of the ventilator keeping my daughter alive. It was a sound of struggle of a life hanging by a thread. But in the palm of my hand on the glowing screen of Zola's phone, a different world was playing out. It was a world of bass-heavy music and sunlight bouncing off white fiberglass. I watched the live stream again, unable to look away from the grotesque display. Hunter was shirtless, his skin already turning pink under the midday sun. He was holding a bottle of champagne by the neck, swinging it around like a trophy. Behind him, the Pacific Ocean was a flat, indifferent blue. He was laughing. It was a deep belly laugh, the kind of laugh a man releases when a great weight has been lifted from his shoulders. He pulled a young woman into the frame. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a bikini that cost more than my truck. She giggled and whispered something in his ear. Hunter roared with approval and turned to the camera. To new beginnings, he shouted over the wind. To the universe finally correcting its mistakes. He wasn't talking about business. He wasn't talking about investors. He was talking about my daughter. To him, Zola wasn't a wife or a partner. She was a mistake that was finally being corrected. She was an obstacle that had been removed. I felt a tremor in my hand, not from age, but from a rage so pure it felt like liquid nitrogen in my veins. I closed the Instagram app before I crushed the phone in my grip. I needed to think. I needed to be the engineer, not the father. I unlocked Zola's phone again and navigated to her insurance application. I knew Zola. She was meticulous. She had her apps organized, her passwords saved. I found the notification I was looking for. A claim had been opened at 3:15 a.m., just 45 minutes after the crash. Hunter hadn't wasted a second. I opened the file. He had uploaded photos of the crash site, likely taken by the tow truck driver or a bystander to expedite the payout. He wanted the car totaled and the check cut before Zola was even cold. I zoomed in on the photos. To a layman, it just looked like a twisted heap of metal wrapped around a concrete pillar. But I am not a layman. I spent 40 years building bridges and analyzing stress fractures in steel. I know how materials fail. I know how momentum works. I looked at the road leading up to the pillar. It was clean. There were no black streaks of rubber. There was no chatter from the anti-lock braking system biting into the asphalt. If Zola had fallen asleep at the wheel, there would be a drift pattern. If she had swerved to avoid a deer, there would be yaw marks. But if she had seen the pillar coming and hit the brakes, there should have been rubber burned into the road. There was nothing. She hadn't braked. Or rather, she had tried to brake, and the car hadn't responded. Modern hydraulic brake systems do not simply fail. They are closed loops. Even if the booster fails, you have manual pressure. Unless the lines are cut. Unless the fluid is drained. I looked at the front wheel well in the photo. It was shadowed, but I saw the dark stain on the pavement beneath the caliper. It wasn't oil. It was thinner. Brake fluid. This wasn't an accident. This was a calculation. I closed the insurance app and opened her messages. My thumb hovered over Hunter's name. The thread was mostly one-sided. Zola asking when he would be home. Zola asking if he had paid the electric bill. Zola asking if he loved her. His replies were short, dismissive. But there was one message sent at 2:45 a.m., right after the ambulance arrived, right before he started his live stream. I opened it. The timestamp glared at me. He had sent it while she was being wheeled into surgery. Do us both a favor and let go Zola. Don't drag this out. Die quickly so I can get paid. I stared at the words. They were simple words, brutal words. They were the words of a man who had no soul, a man who had looked at the woman who supported him, loved him, and housed him, and saw only a paycheck. He thought she would never read it. He thought she would die on that table. He was banking on it. I took a screenshot. This was it. This was the smoking gun. I dialed Stein. He answered on the first ring. He knew better than to keep me waiting when I was in this state. It is done, Stein said, his voice crisp. The Omega protocol is active. I have flagged every account linked to her social security number and his. I have contacted the fraud department of the major credit bureaus. I have placed a freeze on the title of the house and the cars. Good, I said, my voice sounding like gravel grinding together. But I want more. Name it Cyrus. He is on a yacht, I said. A rental, most likely, or a charter. Find out who owns it. I can have that in 2 minutes, Stein said. I can hear the typing of his keyboard in the background. Why? Because I want to buy the debt, I said. Buy the debt. If he chartered it, he put down a deposit, I explained. But the final bill is due upon return to the dock. If his cards are frozen, he can't pay. I want you to contact the charter company. Tell them the Blackwood Trust will cover the liability, but only if they follow my instructions exactly. And what are those instructions? Stein asked. I told him. On the other end of the line, Stein let out a low whistle. That is cold, Cyrus. That is biblical. He tried to kill my daughter Stein, I said. I am going to drown him on dry land. I hung up the phone. I looked at the hospital one last time. Zola was in there fighting for every breath. She was fighting because she was a Blackwood. We do not break easily. We do not give up. I got into the rental car. It was a cheap sedan that smelled of stale cigarettes, but at that moment it felt like a tank. I checked the address of the marina Stein had sent to my phone. Marina del Rey, slip 42. I looked in the rearview mirror. The man staring back at me wasn't the retired mechanic from Chicago. The tired eyes were gone. The slump in the shoulders was gone. In their place was the man who had fired 300 incompetent workers to save a project. In their place was the man who had stared down union bosses and corrupt city officials. In their place was a father who had just found the wolf that bit his child. Hunter wanted to celebrate. He wanted a party. I put the car in gear and peeled out of the parking lot. I was bringing the party to him. The salt air of Marina del Rey hit me the moment I stepped out of my rental car. It was a smell I usually associated with peace, with fishing trips and quiet mornings. Today it smelled of corruption. The parking lot was a parade of excess. Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and Bentleys were lined up like shiny beetles in the sun. My dented sedan looked like a roach that had scurried into a jewelry box. I walked toward the main gate of the pier. I was wearing my stained work jacket and boots that had seen more mud than these people had seen in a lifetime. I didn't care. I wasn't here to impress anyone. I was here to collect a debt. A security guard stepped out of the booth. He was young with a jawline he probably spent hours admiring in the mirror and a uniform that was too tight across the chest. He looked at me with the kind of disdain reserved for roadkill. Deliveries are around the back, Pops, he said, not even bothering to lift the gate. And you are late. The catering staff is already loading. I am not catering, I said, my voice low. I am here to see a guest. The guard laughed. It was a short, sharp bark. Look at you. You aren't seeing anyone on this pier unless you are scrubbing the deck. This is a private charter. High security. Now turn that piece of junk around and beat it before I call the cops. He reached for his radio, his hand hovering over his belt. He thought he was powerful. He thought he was the gatekeeper. He didn't know he was standing in the way of a freight train. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in 20 years. It rang twice. Cyrus. The voice was older now, gravelly, but I recognized it instantly. It was Elias Thorne. He owned this marina. He owned half the waterfront. And 30 years ago, when the I-90 bridge collapsed during a freak storm, I was the one who pulled him out of his submerged truck before the river took him. He owed me a life. "I am at your front gate, Elias," I said. "Your guard won't let me in." There was a pause, then the sound of movement on the other end. "Put him on." I held the phone out to the guard. He looked at it suspiciously, then at me. "Take it," I said. He grabbed the phone and held it to his ear. "Yeah," he said, his tone bored. Then his face changed. It went pale. His posture straightened so fast I thought his spine would snap. "Yes, sir." "No, sir. I didn't know. Right away, sir." He handed the phone back to me with a trembling hand. The disdain was gone, replaced by pure terror. "Mr. Thorne says you have full access, sir. He says to take the golf cart." I didn't even look at him. I pocketed the phone and walked past him. I didn't take the golf cart. I wanted to walk. I wanted to feel the wood of the dock under my boots. I wanted the anger to build with every step. The pier was long lined with yachts that cost more than most neighborhoods. I walked past them, ignoring the stares of the deckhands polishing chrome and the wealthy owners sipping wine on their aft decks. I kept my eyes forward. I followed the sound of the bass. It was thumping like a heartbeat, a rhythmic, mindless pulse that vibrated through the planks. As I got closer, I heard the shrieks of laughter. I smelled the expensive cigars. And then I saw it. The yacht was named the Sovereign. It was a 100-foot monstrosity of white fiberglass and dark glass. It was the kind of boat people rented when they wanted to pretend they were gods. And there was Hunter. He was standing on the upper deck, leaning over the railing like a king, surveying his subjects. He was wearing linen pants and an unbuttoned shirt that fluttered in the breeze. He had a cigar in one hand and a crystal tumbler in the other. He looked golden. He looked untouchable. Below him on the main deck, the party was in full swing. Women in bikinis were dancing on the tables. Men in expensive sunglasses were pouring champagne onto the floor just to watch it splash. It was a display of waste so grotesque it made my stomach turn. This was Zola's money. This was the college fund she had saved. This was the equity from her house. This was her life's work being sprayed into the ocean by a man who had never worked a hard day in his life. I walked up the gangway. 2 large men in black t-shirts stepped forward to block me. They were hired muscle paid to keep the riffraff out. One of them put a hand on my chest. "Whoa there, Grandpa. You are lost." I didn't stop. I looked him in the eye. "Move," I said. Before he could react, a voice boomed from above. "Wait, let him through." I looked up. Hunter was grinning down at me. His eyes were glassy, his face flushed with alcohol and arrogance. "Well, well, well," Hunter shouted, his voice slurring slightly. "Look who it is, the ghost of Christmas past." The music didn't stop. The party didn't stop. The people around him just turned to look amused by the spectacle. Hunter waved his hand, gesturing for me to come up. "Let him up, boys. Let's see what the old man wants. Maybe he is here to fix the toilet." The bouncers stepped aside, smirking. I walked up the stairs to the upper deck. My boots left dirty prints on the pristine white carpet. I didn't care. When I reached the top, the music seemed deafening. Hunter was surrounded by his sycophants, a group of young, hungry-looking people who laughed at his jokes and drank his liquor. They looked at me with open disgust. I was a stain on their perfect afternoon. Hunter took a drag from his cigar and blew the smoke in my direction. "Cyrus," he said, shaking his head mockingly, "you look terrible." "What happened? Did the homeless shelter kick you out early?" The crowd laughed. A blonde woman draped over a lounge chair giggled and whispered something to her friend. I stood my ground. I stood tall. "I came from the hospital, Hunter," I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the noise. "Zola is fighting for her life, and you are here." Hunter rolled his eyes. He took a sip of his drink. "She is fine, Cyrus. She is tough. Like a cockroach. Hard to kill." The cruelty of it took my breath away. He wasn't just indifferent. He was hateful. "You told the doctors you were raising money," I said. "You told them you were meeting investors." I Am Hunter spread his arms wide. "Look around you, old man. This is networking. This is how business gets done in the real world. Not that you would know anything about that. You spend your life fixing other people's mistakes for minimum wage." He stepped closer to me. He smelled of expensive scotch and sweat. Did she send you? Did she wake up and send her daddy to check on me? She is in a coma. Hunter, I said. She might not wake up. Hunter's face didn't change. If anything, he looked relieved. Well, that is a tragedy, isn't it? He said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. A real tragedy. But life goes on, Cyrus. The bills still need to be paid. And since your daughter was too selfish to sign the trust fund over to me while she was awake, I have to find other ways to maintain my lifestyle. He poked me in the chest with a manicured finger. You see, Cyrus, you are looking at the future. I am young, I am hungry, and I am finally free of that anchor you call a daughter. She held me back. She wanted to save. She wanted to be prudent. Prudence is for poor people. He laughed again, a sound that grated on my soul. I looked at him. I looked at the man my daughter had loved. I saw nothing but a hollow shell filled with greed. You are celebrating her death, I said. I am celebrating my life, Hunter corrected. And you are ruining the vibe. He turned to his friends. Can you believe this guy? He shows up here looking like a dumpster fire and tries to lecture me. He probably wants a handout. That is what this is really about, isn't it, Cyrus? You want me to cut you a check? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled wad of cash. Hundreds. 50s. He didn't count it. He just threw it at me. The bills fluttered through the air, landing on my boots on the deck on my jacket. Take it. Hunter sneered. Go buy yourself a new shirt, maybe a bath, and then get the hell off my boat. I didn't move. I didn't look at the money. I kept my eyes locked on his. You are going to regret this, Hunter, I said. Regret what? Giving charity to the elderly? He laughed, and then with a sudden violent motion he threw the contents of his glass at me. The amber liquid hit my face. It burned my eyes. It soaked into my shirt. Ice cubes bounced off my chest. The music stopped. The laughter died. The entire deck went silent. Hunter stood there, his hand still extended, a look of pure malice on his face. Oops, he said, smiling. My hand slipped. Now get out of here, old man, before I have you thrown overboard. I wiped the scotch from my eyes. I tasted the alcohol on my lips. It tasted like war. I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. I turned around and walked away. I left the money on the floor. I left the insults in the air. Hunter thought he had won. He thought he had humiliated me. He started laughing again, and the music swelled back up, drowning out the moment. But as I walked down the gangway, I wasn't humiliated. I was focused. I pulled my phone from my pocket. The screen was wet, but it still worked. I dialed Stein. Do it, I said. I heard the click of a keyboard on the other end. And then I waited for the scream. The amber liquid dripped from my chin and soaked into the collar of my old work jacket. It burned my eyes, but I did not blink. I did not wipe it away. I stood there, a statue carved from granite and patience, while the ice cubes slid down my chest and clattered onto the teak deck. The initial gasp from the crowd had faded, replaced by a nervous, titillating silence. They were waiting to see what the old man would do. They were waiting for the explosion. But I gave them nothing. I did not raise my fist. I did not shout. I simply stared at Hunter, my eyes locking onto his with a weight that should have crushed him. Hunter, however, was drunk on more than just scotch. He was drunk on power, on the adrenaline of cruelty, and on the absolute certainty that he was untouchable. When I didn't react, his grin widened. He mistook my restraint for weakness. He mistook my silence for submission. He turned back to his audience, spreading his arms wide as if he were a prophet delivering a sermon on the mount. Look at him, Hunter announced, his voice booming over the low hum of the yacht's engines. Look closely, everyone. This is what failure looks like. He began to circle me, a shark circling a wounded seal. He gestured at my boots, my stained pants, my weathered hands. This is a man who spent his entire life playing by the rules, Hunter sneered. He punched a clock. He paid his taxes. He scraped and saved and fixed other people's toilets for minimum wage. And where did it get him? Standing here, soaking wet, begging for scraps from a man half his age. The crowd chuckled. It started as a few nervous giggles, but Hunter's confidence was infectious. Soon they were laughing openly. The beautiful women in their designer bikinis, the men in their linen suits, they all looked at me with a mixture of pity and revulsion. I was the entertainment. I was the court jester brought in to remind them of how superior they were. Hunter stopped in front of me again. He leaned in close, his breath hot and sour with alcohol. You know what the funny thing is, Cyrus? he said, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper that was loud enough for the front row to hear. Zola was just like you. She was small. She thought small. She was always worried about the future, always tucking money away for a rainy day. She didn't understand that you have to grab life by the throat. He took a sip from a fresh glass that a waiter had hurriedly placed in his hand. That is why she is in that hospital bed, Hunter said, and the cruelty in his eyes was absolute. Because she hesitated. Because she was weak. The universe weeds out the weak Cyrus. It clears the path for the kings. I felt the rage coiling inside me, a tight, hot spring ready to snap. He was talking about my daughter, the woman who had worked 2 jobs to support his failed startups, the woman who had nursed him when he was sick, the woman who was currently fighting for every single breath she took. He was spitting on her memory while spending her money. But still I waited. The trap was set. I just needed him to step into it with both feet. Hunter seemed annoyed by my lack of reaction. He wanted me to break. He wanted me to cry or beg or attack him so he could have his security guards beat me senseless. My stoicism was an insult to his performance. "You want money?" "Is that it?" Hunter asked, his voice rising in pitch. "You came all this way smelling like a sewer because you want a handout." He reached into the pocket of his linen trousers. He pulled out a thick knot of cash. It was a rubber-banded stack of $100 bills likely withdrawn from Zola's emergency fund earlier that morning. "Dance for it," Hunter said. He tossed the stack of money onto the wet deck. It landed with a heavy slap right between my boots. "Go on," he taunted. "Pick it up." "That is $5,000, old man. That is more than you make in a year of tinkering with broken lawnmowers. Bend the knee and pick it up." The silence on the deck became heavy, suffocating. Even the music seemed to fade into the background. All eyes were on the money. All eyes were on me. I looked down at the bills. They were soaking up the spilled scotch and the sea spray. They looked dirty. They looked like trash. I looked back up at Hunter. "Is that all you have?" I asked softly. Hunter's face twisted in anger. He reached into his other pocket. He pulled out his wallet and began throwing credit cards at me. The black card, the platinum card, the gold card. They clattered against my chest and fell to the floor. "Take them!" he screamed, losing his composure. "Take it all, I can print more. I am rich, you old fool. I own this boat. I own this ocean. I own you." He was panting now, his face red veins bulging in his neck. He was manic. He was desperate to prove his dominance. At that exact moment, the phone in my pocket began to ring. It was a sharp, piercing trill that cut through the humid air like a knife. Hunter laughed a harsh barking sound. "Answer it," he shouted. "Maybe it is the hospital calling to tell us the good news." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the phone. I did not look at the screen. I knew who it was. I pressed the answer button. I pressed the speaker icon. I held the phone up, aiming it at Hunter like a remote control. The voice that came out of the speaker was not a person. It was not Stein. It was the cold, automated, synthesized voice of the International Banking Fraud Alert System. "Alert. Alert. This is a notification for the account holder, Hunter Van Doren." Hunter froze. His mouth hung open slightly. The crowd leaned in, confused. "Transaction attempt declined," the robotic voice droned on loud and clear. "Attempted charge of $50,000 to Marine Charter Services. Status denied." Hunter frowned. He looked around as if looking for the source of a prank. "What is that?" he stammered. "Who is that reason for denial?" The voice continued, relentless and unfeeling. "Insufficient funds. Primary assets frozen by the Blackwood Trust. All associated accounts locked. Please contact legal representation immediately." The voice stopped. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the lap of the waves against the hull. Then the captain of the yacht stepped out from the bridge. He was a large man in a white uniform, and he did not look happy. He was holding a credit card reader in his hand. "Mr. Hunter," the captain said, his voice tight. "We just tried to run the deposit for the extension you requested. The card was declined. We tried the backup. Declined. We tried the corporate account. Frozen." Hunter turned to the captain, his face draining of all color. "That is a mistake." He sputtered, his arrogance evaporating like mist. "Run it again. It is a bank error. I have millions in there. Run it again." I stepped forward. My boots squelched on the wet carpet. I kicked the stack of cash aside. "It is not an error, Hunter," I said. Hunter spun around to face me. His eyes were wide, fearful. He looked at the phone in my hand. He looked at me, and for the first time he didn't see a broke mechanic. He saw the predator. "Who are you?" he whispered. I tapped the screen of my phone, ending the call. "I am the bank," I said, "and I am closing your account." The music cut out, the speakers went dead, the party was over. The silence that descended on the yacht was colder than the deepest part of the ocean. The sound of a declined credit card is quiet. It is just a soft electronic beep followed by a polite message on a small screen. But in the middle of the ocean, surrounded by people who measure their worth in horsepower and diamonds, that beep sounded like a gunshot. Hunter stared at the card reader in the captain's hand as if it were a bomb that had just failed to detonate. His face, previously flushed with alcohol and arrogance, was now a sickly shade of gray. He snatched the machine from the captain, his hands trembling so violently he almost dropped it. "Run it again," Hunter hissed, jamming his black card back into the slot. "It is a chip error. The reader is faulty. Do you know who I am? Do you know who my wife is?" The machine beeped again. Declined. Hunter threw the card onto the deck and pulled out another. It was a platinum business card, the one linked directly to Zola's architectural firm. He swiped it. Declined. He tried a third card. Declined. A fourth. Declined. It was a domino effect of financial ruin. Every asset, every line of credit, every safety net he thought he had was snapping one by one. The silence on the yacht was no longer nervous. It was judgmental. The beautiful women in bikinis began to cover themselves with towels. The men in linen suits started checking their watches and backing away, suddenly remembering urgent appointments they had on shore. They smelled the failure on him, and it repulsed them. The captain stepped forward, reclaiming his card reader. He was a large man with a sun-weathered face, and his patience had evaporated. "Mr. Hunter," the captain said, his voice hard and flat. "The charter fee for the extension plus the catering and the open bar comes to $52,000. If you cannot provide payment immediately, I am legally required to return to port and hand you over to the harbor police for theft of services." Hunter looked around wildly. His friends, the people he had been buying drinks for all afternoon, were suddenly very interested in the horizon. "Guys," Hunter pleaded, his voice cracking, "I just need a bridge loan, just for an hour until I get this bank error sorted out. Mike, Sarah, anyone." Mike, a man who had been laughing at Hunter's jokes 5 minutes ago, shrugged. "Sorry, buddy. My wallet is in the car." Hunter turned back to me. The fear in his eyes was replaced by a sudden, jagged hatred. He lunged toward me, grabbing the lapels of my dirty work jacket. "You did this!" he screamed, spit flying from his mouth. "You hacked my accounts, you old thief! Undo it. Undo it right now, or I will kill you." I didn't flinch. I didn't struggle. I simply looked down at his manicured hands clutching my grease-stained collar. "Let go," I said. Hunter didn't let go. He shook me. I said, "Undo it." I reached up and peeled his fingers off me one by one. My grip was forged from 50 years of wrenching steel bolts. His grip was formed by holding champagne flutes. It was no contest. I twisted his wrist until he yelped and stumbled back. "I did not hack anything, Hunter," I said, adjusting my jacket. "I simply enforced the rules." "What rules?" Hunter shouted, rubbing his wrist. "You are a nobody. You are a broke mechanic who fixes lawnmowers. You don't have the power to freeze a checking account, let alone a trust fund." I stepped closer to him. The crowd parted for me. "You never asked where the money came from," I said quietly. "You saw Zola writing checks, you saw the nice house, you saw the firm, and you assumed she was the source. You assumed I was just the baggage she dragged along." I pointed a finger at his chest. "Zola is a brilliant architect, but she did not build the Blackwood fortune. I did. I hold the patents for the seismic dampeners used in every bridge on the West Coast. I designed the structural steel alloy that holds up the skyline you are looking at right now. The Blackwood Trust is not hers, Hunter. It is mine. I built it to protect her." Hunter stared at me, his mouth opening and closing. He looked like he was trying to solve a physics equation in a language he didn't speak. "That is a lie," he stammered. "Zola controls the money. She signs the checks." "She signs the checks because I allow her to," I said. "She is the beneficiary. I am the trustee, and you, Hunter, are the liability." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a copy of the prenuptial agreement he had signed 5 years ago. I held it up. "Do you remember this?" I asked. "Or were you too busy planning how to spend her money to read the fine print?" "I signed a standard prenup," Hunter scoffed, trying to regain some ground. "It says I get half if we divorce after 10 years. I shook my head. "You signed a Blackwood prenup," I corrected. "Clause 14, Section B. the emergency reversion clause. It states that in the event the beneficiary becomes medically incapacitated and the spouse is deemed negligent, absent, or hostile, all financial authority immediately reverts to the primary trustee. I took a step forward, forcing him back toward the railing. Zola is in a coma. Hunter. That is incapacitated. You were on a boat drinking Cristal while she was bleeding out. That is negligent and absent. And that little text message you sent telling her to die quickly, that is hostile. Hunter's face went white. He remembered the text. So I continued, my voice dropping to a growl. As of 3 o'clock this morning, you do not have a dime. You do not have a house. You do not have a car. You do not even have the shirt on your back because my daughter paid for that too. You have been evicted from the Blackwood life. The captain cleared his throat. He looked at me, then at Hunter. Sir, the captain asked me, are you authorizing payment for this charter? I looked at Hunter. He was trembling. He looked small. No, I said. I am not. This man chartered the vessel. The debt is his. The captain nodded. He pulled a radio from his belt. Security to the upper deck. We have a stowaway. 2 large deckhands appeared from the stairs. They didn't look like they were in a partying mood. They grabbed Hunter by the arms. Hey, Hunter shouted, struggling. Get your hands off me. Do you know who I am? You are a stowaway, the captain said, and we have a strict policy about stowaways. Wait! Hunter screamed, looking at me with wild eyes. Cyrus. Dad, please, you can't leave me here. I can't pay this. They will arrest me. I watched him struggle. I felt nothing. No pity, no satisfaction, just the cold efficiency of a job being done. You wanted to swim in the big ocean, Hunter, I said. Start swimming. The deckhands didn't bother walking him down the gangway. They dragged him to the railing. Hunter kicked and screamed, flailing his legs like a child throwing a tantrum. He grabbed the railing, his knuckles turning white. Don't you dare, he shrieked. My suit. This is Italian silk. One of the deckhands pried his fingers loose. The other grabbed his legs. With a synchronized heave, they tossed him over the side. Hunter flailed in the air for a split second, a look of absolute disbelief on his face. Then he hit the water with a tremendous splash. The cold Pacific water swallowed him. He surfaced a moment later, gasping and sputtering, his hair plastered to his face, his expensive linen shirt translucent and clinging to his skin. He treaded water, coughing up brine. The guests on the yacht rushed to the railing to watch. Some of them were laughing. Most were just filming with their phones. Hunter looked up at me. He wiped the salt water from his eyes. The fear was gone now, replaced by a hatred so intense it was almost palpable. He looked like a drowned rat, but a rat with sharp teeth. You are dead, old man. He screamed from the water, his voice cracking. You hear me? I will bury you. I will take everything. You made a mistake. I looked down at him from the high ground of the deck. The only mistake I made was letting you into my family, I said. I turned my back on him. Captain, I said, I believe your business here is concluded. Yes, sir, the captain said, tipping his hat. I walked down the stairs past the silent, stunned party guests. I walked down the gangway and back onto the pier. Behind me I could hear Hunter splashing and cursing as he began the long, humiliating swim to the shore. He was threatening me. He was swearing revenge. He thought this was a fight he could still win. He didn't realize that I hadn't even started fighting yet. I had just taken away his ammo. I got back into my rental car and checked my phone. There was a message from Stein. Phase 1 complete. Assets frozen. I also found the car insurance policy. You need to see this. I looked out the window at the water. Hunter was climbing up the ladder at the end of the dock, shivering and dripping wet. He stood there for a moment watching my car. He pulled his phone from his sodden pocket and threw it on the ground in a rage. He was broken, but he wasn't finished. A man like Hunter doesn't learn from humiliation. He feeds on it. He would come after me. He would come after Zola. I put the car in drive. I had to get back to the hospital. I had to be there when the wolf came knocking at the door, because next time he wouldn't be wearing a suit. He would be desperate. And a desperate wolf is the most dangerous kind. The drive back to the hospital was a blur of red taillights and cold fury. I gripped the steering wheel of my rental car until my knuckles turned white. The image of Hunter splashing in the harbor water burned into my mind. He was humiliated, yes, He was broke, yes, but I knew men like him. Men like him do not retreat when they are wounded. They attack. They become irrational, and an irrational man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous creature on earth. I parked the car and ran to the elevator. The silence of the third floor was a stark contrast to the chaos I had just left at the marina. I nodded to the security guard at the station, a man named Ortiz, who looked like he could bench press a Buick. I had tipped him $100 earlier just to keep his eyes open. He gave me a subtle nod. All was quiet. But quiet does not mean safe. I took my post in the plastic chair outside Zola's room. I watched the monitors through the glass. Her heart rate was steady but weak. She was holding on. She was waiting for me to finish this. 40 minutes later, the elevator doors dinged. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. I heard the squelch of wet shoes on linoleum. I heard the heavy, ragged breathing of a man who had run a marathon fueled by rage. Hunter turned the corner. He was a sight to behold. His expensive Italian suit was ruined dark with seawater and clinging to his frame like a second skin. His hair was plastered to his skull. He was shivering, but his eyes were burning with a feverish intensity. He wasn't alone. He was dragging a young resident doctor by the arm, a kid who looked like he had just graduated from medical school and had no idea he had walked into a war zone. "This is him," Hunter shouted, pointing a wet finger at me. "That is the man. He is dangerous. He assaulted me. He threw me off a boat. He is trying to kill my wife." The young doctor, whose badge read Dr. Evans, looked at me with alarm. He saw an old black man in dirty work clothes sitting silently outside the room. He saw a wet, hysterical white man in a suit claiming assault. The optics were not in my favor. Sir Dr. Evans said, stepping forward nervously, "You need to leave. Mr. Hunter has medical power of attorney over his wife, and he has requested that you be removed from the premises." I stood up slowly. My knees popped. I unfolded to my full height, which was only 6 feet, but I carried it with the weight of 50 years of ironwork. "I am not going anywhere," I said, my voice low and rumbling like a diesel engine. Hunter pushed past the doctor. He looked manic. He looked desperate. "See," Hunter screamed. "He is threatening me. Doctor, I can't take this anymore. My wife is suffering. Look at her. She is hooked up to machines. She would never want this. We talked about this. She told me if it ever got this bad, she wanted to go. She wanted peace." I felt the blood drain from my face. He was doing it. He was playing the mercy card. He wanted to pull the plug. He wanted her dead before I could fully lock down the assets, before she could wake up and testify, before he lost his chance at the life insurance payout. Hunter grabbed Dr. Evans by the shoulders. "End it." Hunter sobbed, and it was a terrifying performance. Tears mixed with the salt water on his face. "Please, doctor. I love her too much to watch her suffer. Compassionate extubation. Do it now. I am authorizing it." Dr. Evans looked conflicted. He looked at the monitors. "Mr. Hunter, she is stable," the doctor said. "She has brain activity. It has only been 12 hours. We usually wait for—" "I don't want to wait." Hunter roared, his facade slipping. "I am her husband. I make the decisions. Do your job or I will sue this hospital into the ground. I want those machines off. Now." He moved toward the door. He reached for the handle. I moved faster. I didn't run. I shifted. One moment I was by the chair, the next I was a wall of granite between him and the door. I planted my boots. I squared my shoulders. "You are not going in there," I said. Hunter didn't stop. He lowered his shoulder and rammed into me. It was like a wave hitting a breakwater. He bounced off. I didn't budge an inch. I grabbed him by the lapels of his sodden jacket and slammed him back against the corridor wall. The impact shook a framed painting of a sailboat. "Get your hands off me!" Hunter shrieked, clawing at my wrists. I tightened my grip. I pulled him close, so close I could smell the brine and the cheap desperation coming off him. "You do not love her," I hissed. "You love her checkbook. You want her dead because you are broke and you are scared. But you are going to have to kill me first." Hunter swung. It was a clumsy, wild punch aimed at my jaw. I caught his fist in my free hand. I squeezed. I felt the small bones in his hand grind together. Hunter yelped and dropped to his knees, but I held him up by his jacket. Security, Dr. Evans yelled, backing away and fumbling for his pager. "We need security on the 3rd floor now." Hunter looked up at me. The pain in his hand had cleared the mania from his eyes, leaving only a cold reptilian calculation. He realized he couldn't beat me physically. He realized he couldn't bully his way past me. "You are making a mistake, old man," Hunter gasped. "You are assaulting a grieving husband. You are going to jail, and while you are in a cell, I will come back here and I will finish what I started." I threw him away from me. He slid across the waxed floor, leaving a trail of water. "Try it," I said. The elevator doors pinged. Ortiz and two other guards came running down the hall. They saw me standing guard. They saw Hunter on the floor nursing his crushed hand. Ortiz looked at me. He knew I wasn't the aggressor, but he had a job to do. "Gentlemen, separate." Ortiz barked. Hunter scrambled to his feet. He held up his injured hand. "He attacked me," Hunter shouted, pointing at me. "I want him arrested. I want to press charges. And I want to speak to the hospital administrator immediately." Ortiz looked at me. "Mr. Blackwood, step away from the door." I didn't move. "He is trying to kill her," I said to Ortiz. "He is trying to authorize them to pull the plug." Hunter laughed a wet, broken sound. "She is my wife," Hunter spat. "It is my right. You have no rights here. You are nothing." He reached into his wet pocket and pulled out his phone. It was a waterproof model, thankfully for him. He tapped the screen with his good hand. "You think you can stop me with brute force," Hunter said, his voice trembling with rage. "You think you can freeze my money and beat me up and win? You are playing checkers, Cyrus. I am playing chess." He put the phone to his ear. He stared at me with a look of pure venom. Alexander Hunter said into the phone, "It is Hunter. Get down to St. Jude Medical Center. Bring the paperwork. Bring the injunction." He paused, listening, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "Yes," Hunter said. "We are going to court. Right now. I want an emergency order to remove a hostile family member and enforce my medical proxy. And Alexander, bring the police. I have a mechanic to put in prison." He hung up the phone and leaned against the wall, nursing his hand. "Your clock just ran out," Cyrus, Hunter whispered. "My lawyer eats people like you for breakfast." I stood my ground. I watched him. He thought the law was his shield. He thought a suit and a lawyer made him invincible. He didn't know that I had spent 40 years navigating contracts that were worth more than his soul. He didn't know that I had a shark of my own and my shark was already in the water. I didn't say a word. I just reached into my pocket and texted Stein 2 words: legal, now. The physical fight was over. The real war was just beginning. The elevator doors slid open with a smooth mechanical hum that sounded like a guillotine blade dropping. A man stepped out who looked like he cost $1,000 an hour just to breathe. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him like armor, a watch that cost more than a house, and an expression of bored superiority. He carried a leather briefcase as if it contained the nuclear codes. Hunter straightened up, wincing as he moved his crushed hand. He pointed at the man with his good hand, a look of salvation washing over his wet, pathetic face. Alexander Hunter shouted, "Over here! This is him! This is the man who assaulted me! Get him out of here! Get him arrested!" Alexander walked toward us. He did not run. He moved with the calculated stride of a man who owned the floor he walked on. He stopped 3 feet from me, ignoring Hunter completely. He looked at me, then at the security guards, then at Dr. Evans. "I am Alexander Vane," he said, his voice smooth and dangerous like oil on asphalt. "I represent Mr. Hunter in all his personal and financial affairs. I have a court order here signed by Judge Holloway granting my client immediate and unrestricted access to his wife, Zola Blackwood. It also mandates the immediate removal of any non-medical personnel interfering with her care." He handed a thick stack of papers to Dr. Evans. The young doctor looked at the legal documents, his hands shaking. He looked at the judge's signature. He looked at the seal. He looked terrified. "Mr. Blackwood," Dr. Evans said to me, his voice barely a whisper, "I am sorry. This is a court order. If we don't comply, the hospital can be held in contempt. You have to leave." Hunter let out a laugh that sounded like a bark. "You hear that?" Cyrus Hunter sneered, stepping out from behind his lawyer. "The law wins. Money wins. Now get out. Go back to your garage. I have decisions to make." He looked at the door to Zola's room. He looked at it with a hunger that made me sick. He wanted to get in there. He wanted to silence her. I did not move. I did not look at the papers. I looked at Alexander Vane. "You are making a mistake, counselor," I said. Vane raised an eyebrow. He looked at my dirty clothes. He looked at my boots. He dismissed me instantly. "The only mistake here is yours, Mr. Blackwood," Vane said. "You are trespassing. You are harassing my client. And if you do not step aside in 5 seconds, I will have these officers remove you by force and charge you with obstruction of justice." He checked his watch. 5, 4, 3. The elevator doors pinged again. It was a soft sound, but it stopped Vane's countdown. We all turned to look. A man stepped out. He was short-bald and wore a suit that was rumpled from a long flight. He looked like a tired accountant. He looked like someone you would ask for directions in a library. He was carrying a tablet and a travel mug of coffee. But when he looked up, his eyes were sharp enough to cut glass. It was Stein. He walked down the hall taking a sip of his coffee. He didn't look hurried. He looked like he was walking into his own living room. "Objection," Stein said calmly. Vane turned to him, annoyed. "Who are you? I am. The mistake you were talking about," Stein said. He stopped beside me. He didn't shake my hand. "We didn't need to perform for these people." He just nodded at me, a silent acknowledgement that the cavalry had arrived. Stein turned to Vane. "My name is Saul Stein. I represent the Blackwood Trust, and that piece of paper you are holding is worth less than the napkin I used to wipe my mouth on the plane." Vane scoffed. "The Blackwood Trust has no standing here. This is a spousal matter. California is a community property state." Stein tapped his tablet. Actually, Stein said California Code Family Law Section 4320. A spouse forfeits rights to community property and medical authority if there is evidence of domestic abuse or attempted homicide. The hallway went silent. Hunter's face twitched. "Homicide?" Vane asked, his voice dropping an octave. "Be careful, Mr. Stein. That is slander. My client is a grieving husband involved in a tragic accident." Stein smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf who had just cornered a rabbit. "Accident," Stein repeated. "That is an interesting word." He held up his tablet. "We accessed the cloud server linked to Zola Blackwood's vehicle telematics system 10 minutes ago," Stein said. "Modern cars are wonderful things, Mr. Vane. They record everything: speed, braking, location, and audio." Hunter went rigid. He stared at the tablet. "The dash cam inside the cabin has a voice activation feature," Stein explained. "It records when decibel levels rise above a certain threshold. Like, for instance, a screaming argument." Stein pressed a button on the screen. The audio was crystal clear. It filled the hospital corridor, bouncing off the sterile walls. It was Hunter's voice. It was distorted by rage, but undeniable. "Sign the papers, Zola. Sign the transfer, or I swear to God you won't make it home tonight." Then Zola's voice crying, terrified, "Hunter, please! You are scaring me. Slow down." Then Hunter again, cold, deadly. "If I can't have the money, nobody can. You think you can leave me? You think you can cut me off? I will drive this car off a bridge before I let you divorce me." Then a sound of metal grinding, a scream, and silence. Stein stopped the recording. The silence in the hallway was absolute. The young doctor was pale. The security guards were staring at Hunter with open hostility. Alexander Vane looked at his client. He looked at the wetsuit. He looked at the crushed hand. And he realized with the clarity of a man who valued his own career above all else that he was standing next to a radioactive isotope. Hunter Vane said, his voice icy. "Did you threaten her?" Hunter was shaking his head frantically. "No, that is edited. That is a deepfake. They made it up. They are framing me." "Alexander, do something." Vane took a step back. He put the court order back in his briefcase. He snapped the latches shut. "I am afraid I cannot help you, Mr. Hunter," Vane said. "What?" Hunter screamed. "You are my lawyer. I pay you." "You paid me to handle a probate case," Vane said, adjusting his cuffs. "You did not pay me to be an accessory to attempted murder. I am withdrawing as counsel effective immediately." He turned to Stein. "Mr. Stein," Vane said, nodding respectfully, "I will have my office send over the formal withdrawal paperwork within the hour. Good day." Vane turned on his heel and walked away. He didn't look back. He walked into the elevator and disappeared, leaving Hunter standing alone in a puddle of seawater and lies. Hunter looked around. He was surrounded. The guards were no longer protecting him. They were blocking his exit. I was standing between him and Zola. Stein was holding the evidence that would bury him. He was alone. "It is not true," Hunter whispered, his voice trembling. "I love her. We were just fighting. Couples fight." Stein looked at him with zero sympathy. "Couples fight," Stein said. "Killers confess. And we just sent that audio file to the LAPD. They are on their way." Hunter slumped against the wall. He looked small. He looked defeated. But suddenly a sound cut through the tension. It was a high-pitched, rhythmic alarm coming from inside the room. "Beep, beep, beep, beep." I spun around. I looked through the glass. On the monitor, the green line that tracked Zola's heart rate was spiking. It was racing. Dr. Mabel shouted from inside the room, "She is crashing, or she is waking up. I need help in here." Dr. Evans pushed past me and ran into the room. Nurses flooded in. I pressed my hands against the glass. I forgot about Hunter. I forgot about the money. I forgot about the war. "Zola," I whispered. Her eyelids were fluttering. Her hand, the one I had held earlier, was twitching. She was fighting. She was coming back. Or she was leaving. Hunter pushed himself off the wall. He saw the chaos. He saw his chance. He didn't look at his wife. He didn't care if she lived or died. He only cared that everyone was distracted. He turned and ran. He bolted toward the fire exit, his wet shoes squeaking on the floor. "Stop him," Stein shouted. But I didn't chase him. I couldn't leave the window. I had to see her eyes. I had to know she was still with me. "Let him run," I said, my eyes fixed on my daughter. "He has nowhere to go." Inside the room, Zola gasped. Her back arched off the bed. The machine screamed a steady high note. And then she opened her eyes. The hallway outside room 304 had become a war zone of shouting voices and squeaking rubber soles. Nurses were rushing back and forth, coordinating the stabilization of the patient. Stein was standing near the elevator, barking legal codes into his phone, ensuring the police arrived at the correct entrance. In the confusion and the swirling vortex of medical panic, the door to my daughter's room was left unguarded for exactly 60 seconds. I had slipped inside the moment the crash cart was wheeled out. I needed to be close to her. I needed to see for myself that the spikes on the monitor were life, not death. I pressed myself into the shadowed alcove by the window behind the heavy privacy curtain that smelled of industrial detergent. I wanted to be invisible. I wanted to be the silent sentinel watching over her sleep. The room was dim lit only by the glow of the equipment. Zola was still. The violent arching of her back had ceased. The alarms had been silenced, replaced by a steady rhythmic ping that sounded like a countdown. Then the door handle turned. It was a slow, deliberate motion. It was not the brisk entry of a nurse or the confident stride of a doctor. It was the stealthy creep of a thief. I held my breath. I stayed in the shadows. Hunter slipped into the room. He looked like a specter risen from the deep. His clothes were still sodden, dripping dark spots onto the linoleum floor. His hair was wild, his eyes wide and darting around the room like a trapped animal. He checked the hallway one last time, then clicked the door shut. He didn't lock it. He didn't have time. He thought he was alone. He thought I was outside dealing with the police. He thought he had one last moment to control the narrative. He approached the bed. I watched him through the sliver of space between the curtain and the wall. I watched the man my daughter had married, the man I had tried to tolerate for 5 years, the man who had turned a celebration of life into a vigil of death. He did not look at her with love. He did not look at her with concern. He looked at her with a mixture of fear and loathing so potent it made the air in the room feel toxic. He gripped the bed rail with his white-knuckled hands. He leaned over her, his face inches from hers. Water from his hair dripped onto her cheek, mingling with the sweat of her fever. "Why are you still here?" he whispered. His voice was a hiss, a snake spitting venom. It was not the voice of a grieving husband. It was the voice of a man whose plans had crumbled and who was looking for someone to blame. "You were supposed to go quickly," he said, his voice trembling with a manic intensity. "That was the deal, Zola. You drive the car. You miss the turn. You go to sleep. I get the payout. I start over. It was clean. It was simple." He reached out and touched her face, but it was not a caress. He dragged his thumb down her cheek, pulling the skin, distorting her features. "But you always had to be difficult," he spat. "You always had to make me work for it. Even now you are dragging this out. You are making a scene. Do you know what you have done to me? Do you know what your father did to me?" He laughed, a low, broken sound that vibrated in his chest. "He ruined me, Zola. He froze everything. I have nothing. I have creditors who will peel my skin off if I do not pay them by Friday. I owe $2 million to people who do not use lawyers. They use hammers. And you are lying here holding on to the only thing that can save me." He leaned closer, his lips brushing her ear. "Die," he whispered. I felt every muscle in my body lock up. It took every ounce of discipline I had acquired in 70 years of life not to lunge forward and snap his neck. But I waited. I needed to see. I needed to know the depth of the abyss. Just let go. Hunter pleaded, his voice cracking. Stop fighting. If you wake up, I go to prison. If you die, I might survive. Don't you love me? Didn't you say you would do anything for me? Then do this. Die for me, Zola. Be a good wife for once in your miserable life, and die. He stared at her, waiting for the machine to flatline, waiting for his will to overpower hers. He was trying to murder her with words. He was trying to push her into the dark with the weight of his hatred. And then the rhythm of the monitor changed. It didn't stop. It sped up. Beep, beep, beep. Zola's eyelids fluttered. It was not a spasm. It was a struggle. She was fighting the sedation. She was fighting the pain. She was fighting him. Hunter pulled back, startled. No, he whispered. Don't you dare. Zola's eyes opened. They were unfocused, at first glassy and confused, but then they found him. They locked onto the face of her husband. They saw the wet hair, they saw the madness, and they heard him. A single tear welled up in the corner of her right eye. It slid down her temple, cutting a clean track through the grime on her skin. It was a tear of absolute crushing heartbreak. It was the realization that the monster wasn't under the bed. The monster was holding her hand. Hunter saw the recognition in her eyes. He saw his reflection in her pupils. He realized with a jolt of terror that she was in there. She wasn't a vegetable. She wasn't gone. She was present, and she knew. You heard me? Hunter gasped, backing away. You heard everything. Zola tried to speak. Her mouth moved around the intubation tube. No sound came out, but the shape of her lips was unmistakable. Get out! Hunter began to hyperventilate. He looked at the door. He looked at the pillow. I saw the thought cross his mind. I saw his hands twitch. He was calculating if he had enough time to use the pillow. He was calculating if he could finish the job manually before the nurses returned. He took a step forward, reaching for the pillow. That was enough. I stepped out from behind the curtain. I didn't make a sound. I just moved into the light. My shadow fell over him, consuming him. Hunter froze. He looked up. He saw me standing at the foot of the bed, my arms crossed my face, a mask of judgment. You just confessed to a living witness, I said. My voice was not loud. It was the sound of a coffin lid closing. Hunter screamed. It was a short, high-pitched yelp of pure shock. He stumbled back, tripping over his own wet feet. He crashed into the IV pole, sending it rattling against the wall. Cyrus, he stammered. How long? How long were you there? Long enough to hear you beg my daughter to die, I said. Long enough to hear you admit to the debt. Long enough to know that you are not just a thief, Hunter. You are a parasite, and the host has just rejected you. I walked toward him. I moved slowly, deliberately. I wanted him to feel the space in the room shrinking. She heard you, I said, pointing to Zola. Look at her. Look at your wife. She knows what you are now. There are no more secrets. There are no more lies. There is only you, me, and the truth. Hunter looked at Zola. She was staring at him with a gaze that could have started fires. The love was gone. The trust was gone. In their place was a cold, hard resolve that looked exactly like mine. It is not what you think, Hunter babbled, holding his hands up. I was trying to motivate her. I was using reverse psychology. I was trying to shock her into waking up. It worked, didn't it? See? She is awake. I saved her. He was delusional. He was grasping at straws that were already burning. Get out, I said. Hunter looked at the door. He looked at me. He looked at the window. He realized he was trapped in a room with the two people he had wronged the most in the world. He didn't try to fight. He didn't try to argue. The fight had left him the moment I stepped out of the shadows. He was a bully, and bullies crumble when the victim stands up. He scrambled for the door, slipping on the wet floor, his dignity gone, his humanity gone. He yanked the door open and threw himself into the hallway. I heard him running. I heard his wet shoes squeaking on the tiles faster and faster, moving away from the room, away from the responsibility, away from the judgment. I didn't chase him. I didn't need to. Stein was out there, the police were out there, the world was out there, and it was waiting for him. I turned back to the bed. I walked over to my daughter. I wiped the tear from her cheek with my rough thumb. I brushed the wet hair from her forehead. I am here, Zola, I whispered. I am here, and he is never coming back. Zola looked at me. She blinked slowly. She reached out her hand, her fingers trembling. I took it. I squeezed it. We sat there in the silence, the only sound the steady, strong beating of her heart on the monitor. It was the sound of survival. It was the sound of a Blackwood. Hunter was running, but he was running to nowhere. His life ended in this room. Ours was just beginning. I left the hospital with the taste of antiseptic still clinging to the back of my throat. Zola was stable. Her heart was beating a rhythm of defiance against the man who tried to stop it. But a heartbeat is not evidence. A heartbeat does not put a man in prison for life. I needed something tangible. I needed the weapon. I drove the rental car toward the industrial district south of the city. The GPS led me past the gleaming glass towers of downtown into the grimy, forgotten arteries of Los Angeles, where the streets were cracked and the air smelled of diesel and rust. My destination was a place called Miller's Salvage Yard. Stein had tracked the tow truck dispatch logs. Hunter had not called AA. He had not called the insurance company's preferred vendor. He had called a private scrapper off the books and paid cash to have the vehicle removed immediately. That was mistake number one. Innocent men want an investigation. Guilty men want an incinerator. I pulled up to the chain-link gate topped with razor wire. A sign read "Closed for private processing." I didn't care. I drove the sedan right up to the metal barrier and leaned on the horn. A man in a grease-stained jumpsuit walked out of the corrugated tin office. He was wiping his hands on a rag, squinting against the sun. He looked like a man who asked no questions as long as the envelope was thick enough. I got out of the car. I didn't introduce myself. I walked straight to the gate. "Open it," I said. The man spat on the ground. "We are closed. Come back Monday." "I am here for the black Mercedes SUV brought in at 4 this morning," I said. "The one involved in the collision on the I-10. That car is already slated for the crusher," he said, his eyes shifting nervously to the massive compactor looming in the center of the yard. "I got a rush order on it. It is scrap metal, nothing to see." "Hunter paid you to crush it," I said. "He paid you to destroy the evidence of attempted murder. If you pull that lever, you become an accessory. And I will make sure you spend the next 20 years making license plates." The man hesitated. He looked at my eyes. He saw something there that frightened him more than losing a paycheck. He pulled a set of keys from his belt and unlocked the padlock. "I don't know nothing about no murder," he muttered, sliding the gate open. "I just crunch metal. The car's in the back. Row 4. I walked past him into the maze of twisted steel. It was a graveyard of machines. Skeletons of trucks and sedans were stacked 3 high, casting long, jagged shadows in the afternoon light. I smelled oil and coolant and the stale, metallic scent of violence. I found the Mercedes. It was a mangle of black steel and shattered glass. The front end was accordion-ed into the firewall. The windshield was a spiderweb of cracks. It looked like a beast that had been slain. I approached it with the reverence of a coroner examining a body. I took off my jacket and rolled up my sleeves. I didn't care about the dirt. I lay down on the oil-soaked gravel and shimmied underneath the chassis. It was tight. Jagged pieces of metal tore at my shirt. I clicked on my heavy-duty flashlight. I was looking for the story. Every machine tells a story if you know the language. I traced the drivetrain. I checked the suspension arm. And then I found the brake lines. They ran along the undercarriage like arteries. The rear lines were intact. I shimmied forward to the front axle. The fluid reservoir had leaked, coating everything in a slick, corrosive sheen. I wiped it away with my thumb. There it was. The primary hydraulic line leading to the front left caliper had not burst from pressure. It had not snapped from impact. The rubber casing was severed cleanly. It was a diagonal cut, precise and sharp. It was the kind of cut made by wire cutters. I pulled out my phone and took a dozen photos. I took close-ups of the severed ends. I took wide shots showing the lack of road abrasion. This was it. This was the smoking gun. Hunter hadn't just hoped she would crash. He had engineered it. I was about to slide out from under the car when I heard the crunch of gravel. It wasn't the shuffle of the yard owner. It was heavy boots, multiple pairs. I froze. I clicked off my flashlight. "He is under the car," a voice said. A deep, rough voice. "Not Hunter." "Not the owner?" "Drag him out," another voice commanded. The boss said no witnesses. The car gets crushed with whatever is inside it or under it. I felt a cold calm wash over me. It was a sensation I hadn't felt since Da Nang in 1971. The world slowed down. My hearing sharpened. My fear evaporated, replaced by tactical calculation. Hunter had sent cleaners. He knew I was coming. He must have tracked my phone or had the yard owner tip him off. He didn't just want the car gone. He wanted me gone. I saw a pair of heavy work boots stop right next to my head. "Come out, old man," the first voice said. "Do it easy, and it will be quick." I didn't come out easy. I reached out and grabbed the ankle of the man standing closest to me. I didn't just pull. I twisted. I used the leverage of the ground and the torque of my shoulder to rotate his foot 45 degrees in the wrong direction. He screamed. It was a high, wet sound. I yanked his leg out from under him. He fell hard, his head smacking against the side panel of the SUV with a hollow thud. I rolled out from under the chassis just as a crowbar smashed into the gravel where my head had been a second before. I scrambled to my feet. There were 3 of them. They were big men younger than me by 30 years, wearing leather jackets and holding makeshift weapons. The one I had tripped was on the ground clutching his ankle. The other 2 were circling. One had a crowbar. The other had a chain. "You made a mistake, Grandpa," the one with the chain sneered. "You should have stayed at the hospital." He swung the chain. It whistled through the air. I didn't back down. I stepped in. It is a counterintuitive move. When someone swings a long-range weapon, your instinct is to retreat. But the power is at the end of the swing. The safety is inside the arc. I stepped inside his guard. The chain wrapped harmlessly around my back, stinging but not breaking anything. I drove my fist into his solar plexus. It wasn't a bar fight punch. It was a short, piston-like strike I had learned in the Corps. The air left his lungs in a rush. He doubled over. I grabbed the back of his neck and brought my knee up to meet his face. There was a crunch of cartilage. He dropped like a sack of cement. The third man, the one with the crowbar, hesitated. He looked at his 2 friends on the ground. He looked at me. He saw an old man breathing hard sweat dripping down a face that was etched with stone-cold violence. He roared and charged. He raised the crowbar high, aiming for my skull. He was telegraphing. He was an amateur. I waited. I waited until he was committed. I waited until I could smell his cheap cologne. I sidestepped. I grabbed his wrist with my left hand and his elbow with my right. I used his own momentum against him. I pivoted my hips and threw him. He flew over the hood of the Mercedes and landed in a heap of scrap metal on the other side. He groaned once and went silent. I stood there panting. My chest heaved. My old joints were screaming. My knuckles were bleeding, but I was standing. I looked down at the man with the broken ankle. He was trying to crawl away. "Who sent you?" I asked. I didn't shout. I didn't have the breath for it. He looked at me with terror. "It was a guy from the track," he gasped. He said the car had to disappear. He said an old man might show up. He paid us $5,000 to make sure the car went into the crusher. Hunter. He had used his gambling connections. He had hired low-level thugs to do his dirty work. "Get out of here," I said. "Tell your friends that if I see them again, I won't be this gentle." He scrambled up, limping, dragging his friend. They grabbed the third man and retreated toward the gate, looking back at me as if I were a demon risen from the rust. I turned back to the car. I wasn't done. I opened the driver's side door. The interior was a mess of deployed airbags and shattered plastic. I checked the floor mats. I checked the glove box. Then I looked under the passenger seat. It was wedged deep into the track, hidden by the shadows. A small black object. I reached in and pulled it out. It was a phone. Not Zola's phone. Not Hunter's main phone. It was a cheap prepaid burner phone, the kind drug dealers and criminals use. Hunter must have dropped it during the crash. Or maybe he hid it there, panic making him careless. I pressed the power button. It had 10% battery left. It turned on. There was no passcode. I opened the text messages. The most recent thread was with a contact simply labeled, "The Fixer." "Brakes are cut. Do it tonight. Make sure she is driving. Done. Money is in the account." I stared at the screen. This wasn't just evidence of tampering. This was conspiracy to commit capital murder. This was the death penalty. I put the burner phone in my pocket next to my own. I had the photos of the brake lines. I had the confession from the thug. And now I had the communication with the hitman. I walked out of the maze of cars. The yard owner was hiding in his office, the blinds drawn. I didn't bother with him. He was a small fish. I got back into my rental car. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. There was a smear of grease on my forehead and a bruise forming on my cheek. I looked like a wreck, but I felt like justice. I started the engine. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the burner phone I had just found. A new message was coming in. I looked at the screen. Job done. Why is she still alive in the hospital? I don't do refunds. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I knew where I was going next. I had the evidence. Now I needed the money trail. And I knew exactly who held the keys to Hunter's secret financial life. I put the car in gear. Hunter thought he was celebrating on a yacht. He didn't know that the tide had just gone out and a tsunami was coming. I sat in the rental car with the engine idling while the burner phone glowed in my grease-stained hand. The text messages on the screen painted a picture of betrayal so profound it made my stomach churn. They were sent to a contact named C. Transfer the liquid assets to the Cayman Shell Company now. Do it before the news hits. I am at the bank. They are asking for authorization. Use the signature stamp in her top drawer. You are the secretary. Make it happen, Chloe. Chloe. I closed my eyes and the image from the yacht flashed back into my mind. The blonde woman in the red bikini. The one Hunter had his arm around. The one laughing while my daughter bled. That was Chloe. Zola's personal assistant. The woman my daughter trusted to manage her schedule, her coffee, and her life. The woman Zola had hired straight out of college because she saw potential in her. They were not just killing my daughter, they were dismantling her legacy piece by piece and splitting the proceeds like vultures over a carcass. I put the car in drive. I knew where Chloe lived. Zola had mentioned it once, proud that she paid her staff enough to afford a luxury apartment in Santa Monica. I drove west while the setting sun painted the sky in hues of bruised purple and angry red. I parked in front of a sleek, modern building that smelled of eucalyptus and money. I didn't buzz the intercom. I waited for a resident to exit and caught the door before it latched. I took the elevator to the 4th floor. I didn't knock. I pounded on the door with the side of my fist. It was a sound that demanded an answer. The door opened a crack. Chloe was there. She was not wearing a bikini now. She was wearing jeans and a sweatshirt, and she looked frantic. Behind her, I saw open suitcases on the floor. She was running. "Who are you?" she asked with her voice trembling. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. "I am the man who just threw your boyfriend into the Pacific Ocean," I said. Chloe stumbled back with her face draining of color. "You are Zola's father." I kicked the door shut behind me. The apartment was a mess of clothes and boxes. She was clearing out. She was taking the money and running, leaving Hunter to deal with the fallout, or maybe meeting him in some non-extradition paradise. "Going somewhere, Chloe?" I asked while walking past her into the living room. She tried to regain her composure. She crossed her arms, trying to look tough. "I am going on vacation," she said. "Is that a crime? You need to leave. I am calling the police." "Go ahead," I said while sitting down on her expensive Italian sofa. "Call them. Tell them you are fleeing the jurisdiction after embezzling $2 million from your employer's firm. I am sure they will be very interested in your vacation plans." Chloe froze. Her hand hovered over her phone. "How do you know that?" she whispered. I held up the burner phone. "Hunter is not as smart as he thinks he is," I said. "He leaves a trail. And right now, that trail leads directly to you." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "You think you are special to him, don't you?" I asked softly. "You think you are the partner, the Bonnie to his Clyde. You think you are running away together to spend Zola's money on a beach somewhere." Chloe lifted her chin defiantly. "He loves me," she spat. "He never loved Zola. She was just a bank account to him. We are going to start over." He promised. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "He promised," I repeated. "Just like he promised to love and cherish my daughter until death do us part." "His promises have a shelf life, Chloe, usually until the check clears." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a stack of photos. Stein had been busy. While I was at the salvage yard, he had scraped Hunter's cloud account. I tossed the photos onto the coffee table. They fanned out like a winning hand of poker. "Look at them," I said. Chloe looked. The first photo was Hunter with a brunette at a casino in Vegas, dated 3 weeks ago. The second was Hunter with a redhead on a ski trip in Aspen, dated last month. The third was a text thread with a woman named Jessica discussing how he was going to dump his current side piece as soon as the big payout came through. His current side piece was Chloe. "That is a lie," she gasped while picking up the photos with shaking hands. "These are old." "Check the dates," I said. He was with Jessica 2 days ago. He was telling her that you were annoying him, that you were clingy, that he was using you to get the access codes and then he was going to cut you loose. I watched her face crumble. The defiance melted away, leaving only a scared, foolish child who had been played by a master manipulator. She saw the truth in the pixels. She saw that she wasn't the queen. She was just another pawn. He told me I was the only one she sobbed while dropping the photos. He told me we were soulmates. He told Zola the same thing I said coldly, and then he cut her brake lines. Chloe looked up at me with her eyes wide with horror. He did what? He tried to kill her, Chloe, I said. That is what you are mixed up in. Not just fraud, not just embezzlement, attempted capital murder. If you get on that plane, you are an accessory after the fact. You will go to prison for life. Is he worth it? Is a man who cheats on his mistress worth dying in a cage for? Chloe sank to the floor, burying her face in her hands. I didn't know about the brakes, she cried. I swear. He just said we needed the money. He said Zola was going to fire me anyway. He told me to transfer the funds to the Cayman account or he would tell everyone I stole it. I stood up and walked over to her. I didn't offer comfort. I offered a lifeline. You have one chance, Chloe, I said. You can be the villain in this story, or you can be the witness. She looked up with mascara running down her cheeks. What do you want? She asked. I want everything, I said. I want the transaction logs. I want the access codes to the shell company. I want every text, every email, every voicemail he ever sent you regarding the money, and I want you to testify that he coerced you. I pulled Zola's laptop from her open suitcase. I recognized it by the sticker on the lid. Open it, I commanded. Chloe scrambled up and opened the laptop. Her fingers flew across the keys. She was desperate now. She was fighting for her own survival. Here, she said, turning the screen toward me. This is the ledger. He had me create a labyrinth of transfers to hide the source. But the final destination is an account in the Grand Cayman called Phoenix Rising. Phoenix Rising. Appropriate. He thought he was rising from the ashes of his marriage. Transfer it back, I said. I can't, she said. He has the master key. I can only deposit, I can't withdraw. I looked at the screen. I saw the balance. $2.4 million. Zola's operating capital, her payroll, her life. Give me the account number, I said, and give me the password to his email. You have it, don't you? She nodded. She wrote it down on a piece of hotel stationery. I took the paper. I took the laptop. Stay here, I said. Do not leave this apartment. If you run, the police will find you. If you stay and you testify, I will speak to the district attorney. I will tell them you helped. I walked to the door. Wait, Chloe called out. Is he really going to kill me? I looked back at her. He already killed the man he used to be, I said. He wouldn't hesitate to remove a loose end. Lock your door, Chloe. I left the apartment. I sat in my car and dialed Stein. I have the Cayman account number, I said, and I have access to his email. Send it, Stein said. I will have the forensic accountants trace the routing number. If we act fast, we can petition the International Banking Court to freeze it before he can move it to a non-cooperative jurisdiction. I sent him a picture of the paper. Done, I said. Now we wait, Stein said. We didn't have to wait long. 10 minutes later, as I was driving back toward the city center, my burner phone buzzed. It was a notification from the banking app linked to the Cayman account. Chloe must have set up alerts on this phone too. Login attempt detected, IP address Los Angeles General Hospital. He was trying to access the money. He was trying to run. A second notification popped up. Transaction attempt transfer $2,400,000 to Bitcoin wallet. Status processing. My heart stopped. If he got it into crypto, it was gone. It was untraceable. Then a third notification. Status failed. Account locked by administrator. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Stein had done it. He had slammed the vault door shut just as Hunter's fingers were reaching for the gold. Hunter was broke, he was exposed, and he was trapped in a hospital surrounded by police with no money to pay his hitman, no money to pay his lawyer, and no money to run. But a cornered rat doesn't just surrender, it bites. My phone rang. It was Mabel from the ICU. Mr. Blackwood, she said with her voice urgent, you need to get back here. What is it? I asked. Is it Zola? No, Mabel said. It is Hunter. He just came back. But he is not alone, and he is not asking for permission anymore. I hit the accelerator. The engine roared. I am coming, I said. I hung up and gripped the wheel. Hunter had played his last card. Now he was flipping the table. I drove away from Chloe's apartment with the digital keys to Hunter's stolen fortune in my pocket, but the war was fought on multiple fronts, and I had one more supply line to cut. Stein met me in the lobby of the Centurion Tower in downtown Los Angeles. It was a monolith of steel and glass that scraped the sky, a monument to risk management and actuarial tables. It housed the headquarters of Sovereign Life, the insurance company holding the $10 million policy on my daughter's life. Stein looked fresh despite the hour. He had changed his shirt and he was holding a thick leather binder. The policy was activated 14 days ago, Stein said, walking beside me toward the elevators. It is a high-premium rush approval contract, double indemnity for accidental death. If Zola dies in a car crash, the payout jumps to $20 million. $20 million. That was the price tag Hunter had put on my daughter's head. He hadn't just planned a murder, he had planned a jackpot. We reached the 42nd floor. The reception area was silent plush and smelled of old money. A secretary tried to stop us, but Stein flashed a legal credential that looked governmental enough to make her hesitate. We walked straight past her to the corner office. The nameplate on the door read Arthur P. Sterling, Regional Director. I kicked the door open. Sterling was sitting behind a mahogany desk that was big enough to land a plane on. He was a man who clearly enjoyed the finer things in life. He had a tan that came from a bottle and a suit that cost more than my first car. He was on the phone laughing. When he saw us, he hung up. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked, his voice dripping with annoyed condescension. "This is a private office. I am Cyrus Blackwood," I said, walking up to his desk. "I am the father of the woman you insured for $10 million 2 weeks ago." Sterling's face twitched, just a micro-expression of recognition. He knew the name. He knew the plan. "Ah, yes, Mr. Blackwood," he said, smoothing his tie. "A terrible tragedy. I heard about the accident on the news. My condolences. But I am afraid strict privacy laws prevent me from discussing policy details with anyone other than the beneficiary." "The beneficiary is the man who cut her brake lines," I said, leaning my knuckles on his desk. "And you are the man who approved the policy without a medical exam, without a background check, and without a witness to the signature." Sterling stood up. He was tall, but he lacked spine. "That is a serious accusation," he said. "Mr. Hunter provided all necessary documentation. The policy is valid. If the insured passes away, the claim will be processed according to standard procedure. Now please leave before I call security." "Standard procedure," Stein interrupted, stepping forward. He opened his binder. "Is it standard procedure to approve a policy of this magnitude at 3 a.m. on a Sunday? Is it standard procedure to override the fraud alert system 3 times manually? Is it standard procedure to accept a digital signature that forensic analysis proves was copy-pasted from a 3-year-old tax return?" Stein slammed a document onto the desk. It was a blown-up image of the signature on the policy next to Zola's actual signature from her marriage license. "Look at the loop on the L," Stein said. "Zola has a tremor in her hand from a childhood injury, a micro-tremor. It is like a fingerprint. The signature on your policy is smooth. It is perfect. It is a forgery, Sterling, and you knew it." Sterling looked at the document. Sweat began to bead on his forehead. "I process thousands of applications," he stammered. "I can't verify every single pen stroke. If Mr. Hunter misled us, that is on him. I am just doing my job." "You are not doing your job," I said. "You are conspiring to commit insurance fraud. Hunter didn't just pick this company out of a hat, he picked you, because you have gambling debts, Sterling." I tossed a file onto the desk next to Stein's binder. It was a credit report Stein had pulled in the car. "You owe $200,000 to the Bellagio in Las Vegas," I said. "And you have a second mortgage on your house in the Palisades that is 3 months overdue. Hunter promised you a cut, didn't he?" 10%. $2 million to look the other way while he killed my daughter. Sterling turned pale. He sank back into his chair. "You can't prove that," he whispered. "I don't need to prove it to a judge," I said. "I just need to prove it to your boss." Sterling laughed a nervous, jittery sound. "My boss is in New York," he said. "He doesn't take calls from mechanics." I pulled out my phone. I didn't dial a number. I opened an app. It was the internal shareholder voting app for the Vanguard Group, the massive investment firm that owned the parent company of Sovereign Life. I tapped the screen and turned it toward him. "I am not a mechanic. Sterling," I said. "I am the majority shareholder of the structural steel conglomerate that built this building. I sit on the board of the holding company that signs your paychecks. I have held a controlling interest in Sovereign Life for 15 years. I just never felt the need to visit the branch offices until today." Sterling stared at the screen. He saw my name listed under the executive board. He saw the number of shares. It was a number with a lot of zeros. "Mr. Blackwood," he gasped, his voice barely audible. "I didn't know." "You didn't bother to check," I said. "You saw a man in work boots and you assumed I was nobody. That is the problem with people like you. You only respect the suit. You don't respect the man." I tapped a button on the screen. "I just sent a priority memo to the CEO," I said. "Your access is revoked effective immediately. Internal audit is on their way up. They are going to go through every policy you have written in the last 10 years. If they find one missing decimal point, you are going to federal prison." Sterling looked at his computer. The screen went black. A red message appeared. "Access denied. Contact administrator." He looked at me with terror in his eyes. "Please," he begged. "I have kids. Zola is my kid," I roared, slamming my hand on the desk. "And you bet against her life." I turned to Stein. "Void the policy," I said. "Already done," Stein said, closing his binder. "The claim is denied due to material misrepresentation and criminal conspiracy. Hunter doesn't get a dime." We walked out of the office. Behind us, I heard Sterling sobbing into his hands. He was finished. He was just another domino falling in Hunter's house of cards. But the king was still standing. I walked out of the building and into the cooling evening air. The sun was setting over Los Angeles, casting long shadows across the pavement. I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was the burner phone, the one I had taken from Hunter's car. I pulled it out. A new message had arrived. It wasn't from the hitman. It wasn't from Chloe. It was from an unsaved number. I opened it. Tick-tock, Hunter. The hospital transfer didn't go through. "The Cayman account is locked. You have 24 hours to pay the $2 million plus interest. If I don't see the money by sunset tomorrow, I am going to peel you like an orange. Don't try to run. We are watching the airport." I stared at the screen. The loan sharks. The dangerous men Hunter owed. They knew. They knew he was broke. They knew he had failed. Hunter was somewhere in this city, wet broke and terrified. He was reading this same message on his main phone right now. He was looking at the sunset and realizing it might be his last. A man in that position has only one option left. He has to get the money. And there was only one source of money left in his world: Zola. He couldn't wait for the insurance. He couldn't wait for the inheritance. He needed cash, and he needed it now. He was going to try something desperate, something violent. I put the phone away. I looked at Stein. "He is cornered," I said. Stein nodded. "He knows he is a dead man walking. He is going back to the hospital," I said, realizing the horror of it. "He is going to try to leverage her. He is going to take a hostage. Get the car, Stein. We have to beat him there." We ran to the car. The final act was about to begin. And this time, it wasn't going to be fought with lawyers and bank transfers. It was going to be fought with blood. I sped back toward the hospital, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Stein was in the passenger seat, tracking the police scanner on his tablet. The radio chatter was frantic. Reports were coming in of a disturbance at St. Jude Medical Center. An armed man, a hostage situation in the lobby. Hunter. He had snapped. The pressure, the debt, the humiliation, it had all coalesced into a singular suicidal impulse. He had realized he couldn't win the game, so he had decided to burn the board. Stein looked up from the tablet, his face pale in the dashboard lights. "He bought a gun," Stein said. "An illegal 9mm from a dealer in Skid Row. The dealer got spooked and tipped off a CI. Hunter is heading for the 3rd floor. He is looking for Zola. He thinks he can ransom her," I said, weaving through traffic. "He thinks if he threatens her life, I will unlock the trust. He doesn't understand. He still thinks this is about money. It is about survival for him," Stein said. "He has the cartel on his back. He would rather face the SWAT team than the loan sharks." We screeched into the hospital entrance. It was a scene of orchestrated chaos. Police cruisers were parked at angles blocking the driveway. Officers in tactical gear were taking positions behind cars. Blue and red lights strobed against the glass facade of the building, painting everything in the colors of emergency. I jumped out of the car before it fully stopped. Stein followed, struggling to keep up. A police sergeant stopped us at the perimeter tape. "Back off," the sergeant shouted, his hand on his holster. "This is an active shooter situation. No civilians." "I am the father of the hostage," I roared, pushing against the tape. "My daughter is on the 3rd floor, and the man with the gun is her husband." The sergeant hesitated. He looked at my face, then at the determined set of my jaw. He lowered his hand slightly. "Mr. Blackwood," he asked. "We have been trying to reach you." "Where is he?" I demanded. "He is in the West Wing," the sergeant said, pointing up at the building. "He bypassed the lobby security. He took a nurse hostage at gunpoint. He is barricaded in room 304. He is demanding $5 million in cryptocurrency and a helicopter. Room 304. Zola's room. He was in there with her. He was in there with my defenseless daughter and a gun." The image made my blood boil. It made me want to tear the building down brick by brick. "I need to go in there," I said. "Absolutely not," the sergeant said. "We have negotiators on the phone. We have snipers on the roof. We are handling this." "You are handling a desperate man with a standard playbook," I said, stepping closer. "Hunter doesn't care about helicopters. He doesn't care about negotiators. He is on a deadline. He has debt collectors waiting to skin him alive. If he doesn't get that money in the next hour, he is dead anyway. He has nothing to lose." I pulled out my phone. I showed the sergeant the text message on the burner phone. The death threat from the loan shark. "Look at this," I said. "This is his reality. He is terrified. And terrified men make mistakes. Terrified men pull triggers because their hands are shaking." The sergeant read the text. His eyes widened. "This changes things," he muttered. "He isn't looking for a getaway. He is looking for a payout." "Let me talk to him," I said. "I know which buttons to push. I know where the bodies are buried. I can end this without a bullet being fired." The sergeant shook his head. "It is too dangerous. He is armed and unstable. He is a coward," I spat. "He bought a gun because he is weak. He took a hostage because he is weak. He won't shoot me. He needs me. I am the only one who can give him the money." I looked up at the window of room 304. The blinds were drawn, but I could see a shadow moving. "If you send in the SWAT team, he will panic," I said, my voice dropping to a desperate plea. "He will shoot her just to spite me. Please, let me go in. Let me save my daughter." The sergeant looked at me. He saw a father who had flown across the country in dirty work clothes to protect his child. He saw a man who had dismantled a financial empire in 12 hours. He saw resolve. He tapped his earpiece. "Command. This is Sergeant Miller. I have the father here. He has intel on the suspect's motive. He is requesting to approach as a primary negotiator." There was a pause. Static crackled in the air. "Copy that, Sergeant. Send him in, but put a vest on him, and tell him if he crosses the line of fire, he is on his own." Miller nodded to me. "You heard the man. Vest up. You have 10 minutes to talk him down. If we hear a shot, we breach." I didn't bother with the vest. It would just slow me down. It would make me look like a cop. I needed to look like a father. I needed to look like the man Hunter hated. "I don't need it," I said, ducking under the tape. I walked toward the hospital entrance. The automatic doors were locked open. The lobby was empty, abandoned in the evacuation. Coffee cups sat half full on tables. Magazines lay scattered on the floor. It was a ghost town. I walked to the elevator. I pressed the button. It didn't come. The police had locked them down. I went to the stairwell. I climbed the 3 flights, my boots echoing on the concrete. I wasn't tired. I wasn't winded. I was fueled by a cold, hard purpose. I reached the 3rd floor. I opened the door slowly. The hallway was dark. The emergency lights cast long, eerie shadows. At the end of the hall, outside room 304, a food cart had been overturned to form a barricade. "Hunter," I called out. My voice echoed in the silence. "It is Cyrus. I am coming down the hall." There was a shout from inside the room. "Stay back! I will shoot her! I swear to God, I will shoot her!" I kept walking. I walked slowly, my hands raised, palms open. I wanted him to see I was unarmed. I wanted him to see I wasn't afraid. "I am alone, Hunter," I said. "Just you and me. No cops, no lawyers, just family." "Family!" Hunter screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. "You destroyed my life. You ruined everything." I stopped 10 feet from the door. I could see into the room through the gap in the blinds. Hunter was standing by the bed. He was holding a gun to the head of a terrified nurse who was kneeling on the floor. But his eyes were fixed on the door. His eyes were wild. "I didn't ruin anything, Hunter," I said calmly. "I just revealed the truth. But we can fix this. We can make a deal." "A deal?" Hunter laughed, a sound that was closer to a sob. "What kind of deal?" You froze my accounts. You turned my wife against me. I can unfreeze them. I lied. I can make a transfer. I can give you the money you need to pay off your debts. I can give you a head start." Hunter hesitated. The gun wavered slightly. Greed was warring with fear in his brain. "5 million," he shouted, "in Bitcoin. Right now. I can do that," I said. "But you have to let the nurse go, and you have to step away from Zola." I took another step forward. "Don't come any closer!" Hunter shrieked, pressing the gun harder against the nurse's temple. She whimpered. I stopped. "I am right here, Hunter," I said. "I am the one with the money. I am the one you want. Look at me." He looked at me. He looked at the man he had dismissed as a nobody. And for the first time he realized that the nobody was the only thing standing between him and the abyss. "You think you are so smart," Hunter spat. "You think you can manipulate me, but I have the gun. I have the power now. You have a piece of metal," I said. "I have the codes. I have the future." I reached into my pocket slowly. Hunter flinched. "Just my phone, Hunter," I said. "I am going to make the transfer, but I need to see Zola. I need to know she is okay." Hunter stepped back, dragging the nurse with him. He moved away from the bed, giving me a clear view of my daughter. Zola was awake. Her eyes were open. She was watching him. She was watching the gun. She wasn't crying anymore. She was angry. "She is fine," Hunter said. "See, she is watching the show. Now transfer the money." I looked at Zola. I gave her a nearly imperceptible nod. I looked back at Hunter. "I am doing it now," I said, tapping on my phone screen. "But Hunter, there is one thing you should know about that gun." What Hunter asked, distracted by the prospect of salvation. "I bought the gun dealer," I said. It was a lie, a calculated, desperate lie. But in the high-stakes poker game of life and death, sometimes a bluff is all you have. Hunter looked at the gun in his hand. He looked at me. Doubt flickered in his eyes. And in that moment of doubt, I made my move. I stepped across the threshold of room 304, and the heavy door clicked shut behind me, sealing us inside a vacuum of recycled air and impending death. The silence of the hallway was replaced by the high-pitched whine of medical machinery and the ragged, terrified breathing of the man holding a gun to my daughter's head. Hunter stood by the head of the bed. His wetsuit was drying in stiff, salt-stained patches, and his hair was a wild mess that framed a face contorted by panic and exhaustion. The 9mm pistol in his hand was trembling. He had the barrel pressed against Zola's temple, right over the bandage that covered her surgical scars. Zola lay frozen. Her eyes were wide fixed on me. I saw fear there, yes, but I also saw a burning question. She was asking me if I could save her. She was asking me if her father, the man who could fix anything, could fix this. I kept my hands visible, palms open at shoulder height. I took a slow, deliberate step into the room. "I am here, Hunter," I said, my voice calm and low. "Just like you asked. No cops, no tricks, just us." Hunter laughed a jagged sound that scraped against the walls. "Just us," he mocked. "That is the problem, isn't it, Cyrus? It has always been just us. You, me, and her. And you always made sure I knew who was the outsider." He pressed the gun harder against Zola's head. She winced, and a fresh tear slid down her cheek. "You think I didn't see it," Hunter spat. "You think I didn't see the way you looked at me at the wedding. You stood there in your cheap rental tux looking at me like I was the help, like I was some street trash lucky enough to marry your princess." "I didn't look at you like you were trash, Hunter," I said, keeping my eyes locked on his. "I looked at you like a man who hadn't earned his place. And I was right." "You were jealous," Hunter screamed. "You hated that a white boy from the valley was going to inherit your black empire. You hated that Zola chose me. You hated that she listened to me. I pitied you," I corrected him. "I saw a boy who thought the world owed him a living because of the color of his skin and the zip code he was born in. I saw a man who thought ambition was a substitute for work." Hunter's face turned a violent shade of red. The vein in his neck bulged. "I worked," he insisted. "I had ideas. I had vision. But you cut me off. You whispered in her ear. You told her to keep the accounts separate. You made me beg for every dime. Do you know what that feels like, Cyrus? Do you know what it feels like to ask your wife for an allowance like a child while her father sits on millions he doesn't even spend?" I took another step. I was 10 feet away now. "I know what it feels like to starve, Hunter," I said. "I know what it feels like to work double shifts in a steel mill to pay for tuition. I know what it feels like to build something from the dirt up, so my daughter would never have to beg anyone for anything. You didn't want a partner. You wanted a sponsor. I didn't want a sponsor. I wanted respect, Hunter yelled. But you hoarded it all. You walked around in your dirty boots, playing the humble mechanic, laughing at me behind my back. You let me drown in debt while you could have written a check that would have solved everything. I stopped. I looked at the gun. It was a cheap piece of hardware, scuffed and poorly maintained. It looked like it had been passed around the street a dozen times before it landed in his sweating palm. I didn't let you drown, I said. You jumped in the water yourself. You gambled it away. You spent it on cars you couldn't drive and women who didn't love you. And when the bill came due, you decided to trade my daughter's life for your freedom. Hunter looked down at Zola. His expression wavered for a second, shifting from rage to something pathetic. She was supposed to die, he whispered. It would have been clean. I would have been the grieving widower. I would have honored her memory. I would have built something great with the money. I would have proved you wrong. You would have spent it in a year, I said. And then you would have found someone else to bleed dry. Hunter's eyes snapped back to me. The pity was gone. The killer was back. It doesn't matter now, he said. The police are outside. My life is over, but I still have one card to play. He moved his finger to the trigger. I want the transfer, Cyrus. 5 million. Right now. Or I paint this room with her brains. I stood very still. I needed him to look at me. I needed him to doubt his own reality. I told you I bought the gun dealer, I said. Hunter blinked. He looked at the gun, then back at me. You are lying, he said. You are trying to trick me. Am I asked. I leaned forward slightly. Think about it, Hunter. You bought that piece from a guy named Razor on 4th Street, right? A guy with a scar over his lip. Hunter's eyes widened. I had guessed right. Or rather, Stein had. The intel from the streets was fast. He works for me, I lied smoothly. He has worked for me for 20 years. Do you really think a street dealer sells a working weapon to a desperate amateur without checking with the man who runs the block? Hunter looked at the gun with horror. He tried to weigh it in his hand. He tried to remember if he had checked the chamber. I told him to sell it to you. I continued pressing my advantage. I told him to take your money, and I told him to file down the firing pin. Hunter's breathing hitched. He looked at the gun as if it were a snake that had just bitten him. That is impossible, he stammered. I loaded it myself. I saw the bullets. Bullets are real, I said. The mechanism is dead. You are holding a paperweight, Hunter. A useless piece of metal, just like you. I took a step closer. 7 feet. Go ahead, I challenged him. Pull the trigger. See what happens. Hunter was shaking violently now. The doubt was eating him alive. He was a man who had lived his whole life on lies, and now he couldn't tell the difference between a lie and the truth. He looked at Zola. She was staring up at him with eyes of steel, daring him to do it. He looked at me. He saw a man who had destroyed his finances, humiliated him in public, and predicted his every move. He believed I was capable of anything. He believed I was omnipotent. You are the devil, he whispered. I am a father, I said, and I am taking my daughter back. I reached out my hand. Give it to me, Hunter. It is over. Hunter looked at my hand. He looked at the gun. He looked at the door where the police were waiting. He realized he had no exit. He had no money. He had no leverage. But he had hate. A deep, burning hate for the man who had exposed him. He realized that if he couldn't have the money and if he couldn't have his freedom, he could at least have the satisfaction of erasing the source of his humiliation. He smiled. It was a broken, twisted smile. If the pin is filed down, he said, his voice trembling with a sudden dark clarity, then you won't mind if I test it on you. He moved fast, faster than I expected. He swung the gun away from Zola's head. He extended his arm. He pointed the barrel directly at the center of my chest. I saw the black hole of the muzzle. I saw the tension in his finger. I realized in that split second that I had pushed him too far. I had backed the rat into a corner and left him no choice but to bite. I didn't have time to duck. I didn't have time to close the distance. Hunter didn't hesitate. He didn't speechify. He didn't wait for a reaction. He squeezed the trigger. I watched his knuckle turn white. I watched the hammer fly back. and I braced myself for the end. The hammer snapped forward. Click. The sound was smaller than a heartbeat, but it echoed in the room like a thunderclap. There was no explosion. There was no flash of muzzle fire. There was no bullet tearing through my chest. Just the dry mechanical failure of a cheap weapon that had been neglected in a street dealer's pocket for too long. Hunter stared at the gun in his hand. His eyes bulged. For a split second, he looked like a child whose favorite toy had just broken. He tried to pull the trigger again. He tried to rack the slide with his sweaty, trembling hands. He was panicking. He was fumbling. He didn't get a second chance. I didn't wait for him to clear the jam. I didn't wait for him to realize that fate had just given him a reprieve he didn't deserve. I launched myself across the remaining distance. I am 69 years old. My joints ache when it rains. My back is stiff in the mornings. But in that moment, I moved with the velocity of a man who had absolutely nothing left to lose. I hit him in the chest with my shoulder. It wasn't a clean tackle. It was a collision. We went down hard, crashing into the rolling tray table, sending plastic pitchers and medical supplies clattering across the floor. The gun skittered away, spinning under the bed. Hunter screamed. He tried to claw at my face. He tried to knee me in the stomach. He was fighting like a cornered rat, scratching and biting. But I had 50 pounds on him and a lifetime of hard labor in my muscles. I pinned his wrists to the floor. I put my weight on his chest, crushing the air out of him. "Stay down!" I roared. He spat in my face. He thrashed. He was sobbing now, screaming incoherent curses. "You tricked me!" he shrieked. "You lied to me!" "I didn't lie, Hunter!" I grunted, holding him down as he bucked beneath me. "I told you were holding a piece of junk. I just didn't tell you the junk was you." The door to the room burst open. It didn't just open, it exploded inward. "Police, get down. Hands. Let me see your hands." The room filled with the blinding beams of tactical lights. Men in heavy armor flooded the small space. Their rifles raised their voices, overlapping in a wall of commanded noise. I rolled off Hunter and raised my hands. "He is the shooter," I shouted, pointing at Hunter. "The gun is under the bed." 3 officers were on Hunter before he could even take a breath. They didn't handle him gently. They grabbed his arms and wrenched them behind his back. I heard the distinct ratcheting sound of handcuffs tightening. They dragged him up from the floor. Hunter was limp now. The fight had drained out of him, leaving only a wet, shivering mess. His nose was bleeding from the impact. His expensive suit was torn. He looked at the police, then he looked at me, then he looked at Zola. "Wait," he gasped. "Wait, you don't understand. I am the victim here. He attacked me. He tried to kill me. Zola, tell them I was trying to protect you." The officers paused for a second, looking toward the bed. Zola had pushed herself up. She was weak, trembling from the effort, but she was sitting upright. Her face was pale against the white sheets, but her eyes were burning with a fire that no sedative could extinguish. She looked at the man she had married. She looked at the man who had promised to cherish her in sickness and in health. She reached for her left hand. Her fingers were shaking as she gripped the diamond ring on her finger. It was a big ring, a flashy ring. Hunter had picked it out. He had paid for it with her credit card. He had insisted on it because he wanted everyone to know how successful he was. She pulled it off. It resisted for a moment, as if the metal itself knew that the bond was breaking. Then it slid free. Zola didn't speak. She didn't have the breath for a speech. She didn't need one. She threw the ring. It sailed through the air, catching the light of the tactical flashlights. It hit Hunter square in the chest, bouncing off his sternum with a dull ping before clattering to the floor. Hunter stared at the ring lying on the linoleum. It was just a piece of carbon and metal now. It was worthless. "You are fired," Zola rasped. Her voice was raw from the intubation tube, a dry croak that sounded like Judgment Day. The police began to drag him toward the door. Hunter realized it was over. He realized there was no more negotiating. There was no more charm. There was only the cage. And that is when he broke. He didn't go quietly. He didn't walk with dignity. He threw his head back and screamed a primal sound of frustration and entitlement that made the hair on my arms stand up. "This isn't fair," he howled, struggling against the officers. "I did everything right. I played the game. I deserve that money. It is mine." He looked at me, his eyes wide and manic. "You think you won, old man. You think you are the hero. You are just a hoarder. You sat on a pile of gold while I starved. You made me do this. This is your fault. You forced my hand. Keep walking," the officer said, shoving him forward. "No," Hunter screamed, twisting his head to look back at us one last time. "Society did this. The system did this. You can't blame a man for trying to survive. I am talented. I am a visionary. You people are just ants. You are ants, and I am a god." His voice faded as they dragged him down the hallway. I could still hear him screaming about his rights, about his potential, about the injustice of the universe. He blamed everyone. He blamed the gun. He blamed the bank. He blamed the weather. He blamed me. He would never blame himself. To the very end, he was the hero of his own twisted tragedy. The room went quiet. The remaining officers lowered their weapons. A paramedic rushed in to check on Zola. I stood there in the center of the room. My chest was heaving. My hands were shaking. The adrenaline that had fueled me for the last 24 hours was evaporating, leaving behind a crushing weight of exhaustion. I looked at Zola. She was slumped back against the pillows. Her eyes closed, tears leaking from the corners. The nurse was checking her vitals, adjusting her IV. She was safe. She was alive. The wolf was gone. I took a step toward her, and my legs simply refused to work. My knees buckled. I didn't fall hard. It was a slow, controlled collapse. I sank down until I was sitting on the floor, my back against the foot of the bed. "Sir," one of the officers asked, stepping forward. "Are you hit? Do you need a medic?" I waved him off. "I am fine," I wheezed. "Just tired." I rested my head against the mattress. I looked at my boots. They were scuffed and dirty. There was a rip in my pants from the fight at the junkyard. My jacket smelled of seawater and sweat. I was a mess. I was an old man who had flown across the country, fought thugs, hacked bank accounts, and tackled a gunman. I felt every single one of my 69 years pressing down on me. But as I sat there on the cold hospital floor listening to the steady, reassuring beep of my daughter's heart monitor, I felt something else. My lips twitched. The corners of my mouth turned up. I started to laugh. It wasn't a loud laugh. It was a soft, wheezing chuckle that shook my shoulders. It was the laughter of relief. It was the laughter of a man who had walked into hell and walked back out with the only thing that mattered. They had underestimated me. Hunter, Sterling, the thugs. They had all looked at the gray hair and the work clothes and seen a victim. They didn't know. They didn't know that you don't mess with a father. They didn't know that you don't come between a man and his blood. Dad, Zola whispered from above me. I looked up. She was looking down at me over the edge of the bed. Her hand was hanging down, reaching for me. I took it. "We got him, Dad," she said. I squeezed her hand. "We got him, baby girl," I said. "We got him good." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the darkness take the edge off the pain. I knew there would be lawyers tomorrow. There would be depositions. There would be trials. There would be the long, hard road of rebuilding her life and her trust. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, the bad man was in chains. Tonight, the accounts were secure. Tonight, my daughter was breathing. And tonight, the mechanic from Chicago was the richest man in the world, not because of the money in the bank, but because he had kept his promise. I sat there on the floor holding her hand, and I smiled until I fell asleep. 6 months is a long time to wait for gravity to do its work. But when the day of the trial finally arrived, the weight of the evidence was ready to crush Hunter into dust. The Los Angeles Superior Court was packed. Reporters lined the back benches, hungry for the conclusion of the case they had dubbed the Yacht murder plot. They wanted a show. I was there to give them a funeral. I sat in the front row behind the prosecution table. I was wearing a suit today. It was dark blue, tailored, and expensive. I had bought it not to impress the judge, but to show respect for the law. Beside me sat Zola. She was still in a wheelchair, her leg braced in a fixator, but her back was straight and her eyes were dry. She wore a white dress. It was the color of mourning in some cultures, but today it looked like the color of a blank slate. She was ready to write a new chapter, but first we had to close the book on the old one. The side door opened, and the bailiffs brought Hunter in. He had changed. Or rather, he had crafted a new disguise. The arrogant playboy in the linen suit was gone. In his place was a man who looked like he had been sleeping under a bridge for a decade. His hair was long and matted. He had grown a patchy beard that hid his jawline. He walked with a shuffle. His head bowed, his shoulders slumped. He wore an orange jumpsuit that hung off his frame like a shroud. He was mumbling to himself, twitching his fingers. It was a performance, a desperate last-ditch attempt to cheat the hangman. His new lawyer was a public defender named Ms. Klein. She looked exhausted before the opening statements even began. She stood up and addressed the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice soft and apologetic. "My client does not deny the physical actions that took place, but we will prove that he was not in control of his faculties. He was suffering from a severe psychotic break induced by extreme financial stress and undiagnosed bipolar disorder. He did not know right from wrong. He was a man lost in a delusion." Hunter rocked back and forth in his chair, staring at the table. He let out a low moan. It was good acting. If I didn't know better, I might have felt a pang of pity. But I knew better. I knew what lay beneath the act. The trial dragged on for 3 days. The defense brought in paid experts who used big words to explain away evil. They talked about dissociative fugue states. They talked about the pressure of marrying into wealth. They tried to paint Hunter as a victim of his own ambition, a tragic figure who had snapped under the weight of expectations. Hunter played his part perfectly. He cried on cue. He claimed he didn't remember buying the gun. He claimed he didn't remember cutting the brake lines. He said he blacked out and woke up in a jail cell. It was a compelling narrative. I saw some of the jurors nodding. I saw doubt creeping into their eyes. They looked at the broken man in the orange jumpsuit, and they struggled to see the monster. Then it was the prosecution's turn to cross-examine, or rather it was time for the reveal. The prosecutor, Mr. Ramirez, was a sharp man who I had vetted personally. He stood up and walked toward the witness stand where Hunter had just finished a tearful testimony about his blank memory. "Mr. Hunter," Ramirez said, "you claim you have no memory of the events of that day. You claim you were in a fugue state from the moment you left the hospital until you were arrested. Is that correct?" "I don't remember anything." Hunter sobbed into a tissue. "It is all dark. I just wanted to save her. I love my wife." Ramirez nodded slowly. "So you were not capable of forming intent?" he asked. "You were not capable of planning. You were not capable of joy or celebration." "Celebration?" Hunter asked, looking up confused. "Why would I celebrate? My wife was dying. I was in hell." Ramirez walked back to his table. He picked up a remote control. "Your Honor, the prosecution would like to introduce Exhibit G. This is a screen recording taken from the defendant's social media account. It was live-streamed at 12:30 in the afternoon on the day of the accident, approximately 10 hours after the crash and 2 hours before he returned to the hospital to attempt to disconnect life support." Hunter froze. The rocking stopped. The mumbling stopped. He looked at the large screen mounted on the wall of the courtroom. Ramirez pressed play. The audio boomed through the courtroom, the bass-heavy thumping of house music, the sound of wind and waves. And then Hunter's voice, loud, clear, and utterly jubilant. "What is up, everyone? We are live from the Pacific." The video played. There was Hunter, shirtless and tanned, wearing sunglasses and a smile that showed all his teeth. He was holding the bottle of Cristal. He was dancing. "To freedom," Hunter shouted on the screen, clinking glasses with the blonde woman. "To the next level." The jury watched in stunned silence. They looked from the screen where Hunter was the king of the world to the defendant's chair where Hunter was pretending to be a broken pauper. The contrast was violent. It was undeniable. "Celebrating early. The universe clears the path for those who wait." The video ended. The screen went black. Ramirez turned back to Hunter. "Mr. Hunter," he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a razor. "Does that look like a man in a fugue state? Does that look like a man paralyzed by grief? Does that look like a man who doesn't know right from wrong?" Hunter stared at the black screen. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The mask had slipped. The jury had seen the truth. They saw the arrogance. They saw the entitlement. They saw the man who celebrated his wife's murder before she was even dead. Ramirez leaned in close. "You weren't crazy," Mr. Hunter, Ramirez said. "You were happy. You thought you had won. You thought you were rich. And the only reason you are crying now is because you got caught." Hunter's face twisted. The act dropped completely. The twitching stopped. He glared at Ramirez with a hatred that was pure and lucid. "I hate you," he whispered. "I hate all of you." "No further questions," Ramirez said. The jury didn't need to deliberate for long. They came back in 2 hours. I sat holding Zola's hand as the foreman stood up. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty on all counts. Attempted murder in the first degree, insurance fraud, embezzlement, assault with a deadly weapon." The judge, a stern woman who had little patience for theatrics, looked at Hunter over her glasses. "Mr. Hunter," she said, "your actions were cold, calculated, and depraved. You attempted to murder your wife for financial gain. You conspired to defraud an insurance company, you terrorized a hospital, and you came into my courtroom and insulted the intelligence of this jury with a performance that was as pathetic as it was dishonest. She banged her gavel. I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. You are a danger to society, and you will never walk free again. The courtroom erupted. The reporters rushed for the doors. The bailiffs moved in to take Hunter away. Hunter stood up. He didn't scream this time. He didn't fight. The reality of the sentence had crushed him. Life. No parole. He was going to die in a cage. He turned to look at the gallery. He scanned the faces, looking for someone, anyone who might look at him with pity. He found no one. Then his eyes found Zola. He stopped. The bailiffs tugged at his arms, but he planted his feet. He looked at his wife. He looked at the woman he had tried to kill. "Zola," he said, his voice hollow. "Zola, please." Zola looked at him. She didn't look away. She didn't flinch. She looked him up and down, taking in the orange jumpsuit, the handcuffs, the ruined life. She saw the man she had loved. She saw the man who had betrayed her. And she realized that he was already a ghost. He was a memory of a mistake she would never make again. She didn't say a word. She didn't give him the satisfaction of her anger or her tears. She simply turned her wheelchair around. She put her back to him. "Let's go, Dad," she said to me. I stood up. I placed my hand on the handles of her chair. I looked at Hunter one last time. "Goodbye, Hunter," I said. I pushed my daughter up the aisle toward the exit. We moved through the crowd, through the noise, toward the sunlight streaming in through the open doors. Behind us I heard the clanking of chains as they dragged him away. I heard the heavy door of the holding cell slam shut. It was a sound of finality. It was the sound of the past being locked away forever. We rolled out into the Los Angeles afternoon. The air was warm. The sky was blue. It was a beautiful day. Zola took a deep breath, filling her lungs with freedom. "What now?" she asked, looking up at me. "Now," I said, smiling. "We build something new." I opened the door of the car for her. We had a lot of work to do, but for the first time in a long time, we had the time to do it. The nightmare was over. The morning had come. The cast on Zola's leg came off 6 weeks after the trial. The doctors called her recovery a marvel of modern medicine. They marveled at how quickly her ribs had knit together and how the swelling in her brain had subsided without leaving permanent damage. They signed her release papers with smiles and shook my hand and told me I was a lucky man. But doctors only treat the body. They do not have a prescription for the soul. Physically, my daughter was whole. Mentally, she was shattered. She moved into the guest room of the quiet house I had bought in the Hollywood Hills, a fortress of glass and stone overlooking the city that had almost consumed her. For weeks, she barely spoke. She sat by the window watching the smog settle over Los Angeles, her eyes empty and distant. She wasn't looking at the view. She was looking inward, replaying every lie Hunter had ever told her, dissecting every moment of the last 5 years, looking for the signs she had missed. She was drowning in guilt. Drowning. She felt stupid. She felt like a fool for loving a monster. She felt like she had betrayed me by letting him into our lives. I watched her fade. I watched the brilliant architect who could visualize skyscrapers lose the ability to imagine a tomorrow. I brought her food she didn't eat. I bought her books she didn't read. I realized that saving her life in the hospital was only the first step. Now I had to save her from herself. One Tuesday morning, I didn't bring her breakfast in bed. I walked into her room carrying a pair of steel-toed boots and a hard hat. "Get dressed," I said. "We are going to work." Zola looked at me confused. "Dad, I can't work. I don't have a firm anymore. Hunter destroyed my reputation." "I didn't ask for excuses," I said, tossing the boots onto the bed. "I asked for you to get dressed." I drove her out to the port of Los Angeles. We took my old pickup truck, the one that smelled of diesel and sawdust. I didn't take the highway. I took the side streets, driving through the industrial zones where the air tasted like metal and the noise of industry was a constant hum. We pulled up to the base of a massive suspension bridge. It was a titan of steel and concrete spanning the channel connecting the city to the sea. It was ugly to some people. To me, it was poetry. We got out of the truck. The wind was whipping off the water, carrying the scent of salt and tar. I led her to the base of the massive concrete pylon that anchored the bridge to the earth. "Look at this," I said, patting the rough gray surface. Zola wrapped her arms around herself, shivering in the wind. It is a bridge, Dad. I know. I am an architect. I poured this concrete in 1982, I said. I was a foreman then. We had a deadline that was impossible. We had a budget that was a joke. We had an earthquake 2 weeks into the pour that cracked the mold. Everyone said we should scrap it. Everyone said the ground was unstable. I looked up at the cables stretching hundreds of feet into the air, holding the weight of thousands of cars. But we didn't scrap it, I said. We dug deeper. We went down until we hit bedrock. We poured more steel into the core than the plans called for. We built a foundation that could survive the apocalypse. I turned to Zola. Hunter was just a bad renovation, Zola. He was cheap paint. He was a cracked window. He was termites in the walls. He came in and he made a mess, and he tried to burn the house down. I took her shoulders in my hands, forcing her to look at me. But he didn't touch the foundation. You are the foundation. You are a Blackwood. We are built on bedrock. We are built on steel. A house can burn down, Zola. You can lose the roof. You can lose the walls. But as long as that foundation is solid, you can build again, and you can build higher than before. Zola looked at the pylon. She looked at the cars driving overhead, oblivious to the strength that held them up. She looked at me. I saw the first spark of life return to her eyes. It wasn't happiness yet. It was anger. It was pride. I let him fool me, she whispered. I let him take everything. He took money. I said, shrugging. Money is just paper. I can print more paper. He didn't take your talent. He didn't take your mind. He didn't take your blood. I reached into the truck and pulled out a roll of blueprints. I spread them out on the hood of the truck, weighing the corners down with loose rocks. This is a plot of land I bought yesterday, I said, pointing to the survey map. It is downtown. Prime real estate. It is currently a parking lot. Zola looked at the map. Her professional instincts kicked in automatically. She traced the lines with her finger. The zoning is mixed use, she said, her voice gaining strength. You could go vertical here, 40 stories easily. But the soil composition near the river is tricky. You would need a deep pile foundation. I smiled. I handle the foundation, I said. You handle the sky. Zola looked up at me. A tear slid down her cheek, but this time it wasn't a tear of despair. It was a tear of release. You want to build a skyscraper, she asked. I want to build an empire, I corrected her. Hunter wanted to be a big shot. He wanted to live off your name. I think it is time we remind this city what the name Blackwood actually means. Zola wiped her face. She took a deep breath, inhaling the industrial air. She straightened her back. She looked at the bridge one last time, then she looked at the blueprints. I don't want to do 40 stories, she said. I raised an eyebrow. No, she said, a fierce smile touching her lips for the first time in months. If we are going to do this, let's do 60, and I want the facade to be steel, black steel, I laughed. It was a loud, booming sound that echoed off the concrete. Black steel it is, I said. We stood there on the hood of the truck for 2 hours, sketching plans, making notes, arguing about load-bearing walls and wind shear. We weren't father and daughter dealing with trauma anymore. We were partners. We were engineers of the future. When we finally got back in the truck, Zola didn't look back at the bridge. She looked forward. She pulled out her phone, and instead of checking social media or looking for news about Hunter, she opened her drafting app. Dad, she said as we merged onto the highway. Yeah, baby girl. Thank you, she said. Not for saving my life, but for reminding me that I have one. I reached over and squeezed her hand, the hand that had thrown the ring, the hand that was going to draw the skyline of Los Angeles. The foundation held Zola, I said. Now let's see how high we can climb. We drove back toward the city, ready to work. The ashes of the past were behind us. We were about to build a fire that no one could put out. 5 years go by fast when you are busy building a legacy. The Blackwood Tower now pierces the smog of Los Angeles, standing 60 stories tall, a monolith of obsidian steel and glass that reflects the city back at itself. It is the tallest building on the West Coast, and every inch of it was designed by my daughter. It is not just a building, it is a statement. It says, we are here. It says we survived. It says we are unbreakable. I am 74 years old now. My knees creak more than they used to, and my hands have a tremor that I try to hide, but I still come to the office every Tuesday. I sit in the corner of the boardroom in my old leather chair wearing my flannel shirt and my work boots. The board members in their Italian suits used to look at me with confusion. Now they look at me with fear. They know that the old man in the corner is the only reason they have a job. I spend most of my days watching Zola. She is not the same woman who lay broken in that hospital bed. She is iron now. She walks into rooms and the air pressure changes. She commands respect not because of her name, but because she is the sharpest mind in the room. She runs Blackwood Industries with a terrifying efficiency. She has no patience for liars. She has no mercy for thieves. She is everything I hoped she would be. Last week I was watching the security feed from the lobby. A young man walked in. He was handsome. He was wearing a suit that cost too much and a smile that was too bright. His name was Chase. He was a hedge fund manager, or at least that is what he told people. He reminded me of someone. He reminded me of a man who is currently sitting in a cell in San Quentin staring at a concrete wall. Chase had been trying to get a meeting with Zola for months. He didn't want a business deal. He wanted a date. He waited for her by the elevators holding a bouquet of rare orchids. When Zola walked in, flanked by her security detail, he made his move. He flashed that smile, the one that says, "I know what you need." He stepped into her path. "Zola," he said, his voice smooth like oil. "You have been working too hard. Let me take you to dinner. Let me take care of you." I leaned forward in my chair, ready to call security. I reached for the phone, but then I stopped. I saw Zola's face. She didn't flinch. She didn't pull away. She didn't look at her guards. She just smiled. It was the same smile I gave Hunter on the yacht right before I threw him overboard. She reached into her briefcase. She didn't pull out a phone. She didn't pull out a wallet. She pulled out a document. It was thick bound in heavy blue paper. She handed it to him. Chase looked confused. He held the flowers in one hand and the document in the other. "What is this?" he asked. "It is a prenuptial agreement," Zola said, her voice carrying across the marble floor. "But it is also a non-disclosure agreement and a liability waiver. It is 50 pages long." Chase laughed nervously. "We are just going to dinner, Zola. We aren't getting married." Zola stepped closer to him. She towered over him in her heels. "If you want to buy me a salad, you have to sign it," she said. "Clause 1 states that my assets remain mine in perpetuity. Clause 2 states that if you ever try to access my accounts using emotional manipulation, you consent to immediate prosecution. And Clause 3 states that if you ever lie to me, my father will find you." Chase turned pale. He looked at the document. Then he looked at Zola. "Who is your father?" he asked. Zola pointed at the camera in the corner of the ceiling. She looked directly into the lens. She looked at me. "The man watching you right now," she said. Chase looked up at the camera. He dropped the flowers. He handed the document back to her. "I think I left my car running," he stammered. He turned and walked away fast. He almost ran out of the building. I laughed until my sides hurt. I laughed until tears ran down my face. She had learned. She had learned that love is precious, but trust must be earned with blood and time. She had learned that you build walls not to keep people out, but to see who cares enough to knock on the door respectfully. She isn't cold. She isn't bitter. She is just protected. She found a partner a year ago, a quiet architect who works with his hands and treats her like an equal. He signed the papers without blinking. He loves her for her mind, not her tower. I sat back in my chair and looked out the window at the city below. I saw the bridges I built. I saw the skyline my daughter changed. People look at me and they still see a mechanic. They see an old man in a dirty truck. They don't know that I hold the keys to the city. They don't know that I am the ghost in the machine. That is fine. I like the shadows. It is easier to watch the wolves when they don't know you are there. I kept my promise. I saved her. And in doing so, I saved myself. Never judge a book by its cover. And never ever assume that a father won't burn the world down to keep his child warm. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button and subscribe for more tales of justice and revenge. Let me know in the comments if you have ever had to protect someone you love from a wolf in sheep's clothing. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your boots on the ground. Through this ordeal, I learned that the strongest steel isn't found in the bridges I built, but in the resolve to protect family. Hunter chased the illusion of wealth, blinding himself to the true value of loyalty and trust. My dirty boots were never signs of failure. They were badges of a life built on substance, not flash. True power doesn't need to shout from a yacht. It waits quietly, ready to act when it matters most. We build our legacies not just with money, but with the courage to burn down the lies to save the truth. If you enjoyed watching Justice Be Served, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories. Give me your mouse. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who judged you by your appearance? Tell me your story in the comments below.